Chapter 454. The tribe's chief actually came to ask if the Alliance's deputy commander was colluding with the strongest warlock of the tribe? What the hell? Most of the orcs did not understand the common language, but the elves did. At that moment, the elves perked up their ears. Both sides had stopped fighting, and pulled apart to listen to the conversation between the two leaders. The few orcs who knew the common language were ready to be translators. As a leader of the Alliance, Xueqi did not have to answer Orgrim's stupid question. But Xueqi did not dare to not answer. Colluding with the Horde was a major crime. Thinking about the fate that Alterac was about to face, King Eden would probably be cursed for all eternity even after his death. Xueqi used a voice amplification spell to answer. Colluded. The pitiful orc king Orgrim. Don't you know that you are being used by Gul'dan? No, I should say. Don't you know that our Alliance and your Horde are all victims of the Burning Legion's Demon Lord scheme? What? No wonder Orgrim was shocked. He really did not know Gul'dan's motives, or the source of his true power. The Lord of the Burning Legion, the evil god Sargeras, controlled our world's guardian, Medivh. He colluded with your warlock Gul'dan, who was seduced by the Demon Lord, Kill Jaden. That's how the Dark Portal came about, and how your Horde invaded the world of Azeroth. To put it bluntly, you orcs are just pathfinders for the demons to invade this world. No, that's because our world is on the brink of destruction. Orgrim argued. Yes, it's because of the power of the demons that brought your world to destruction. Xueqi did not hold back his sarcasm. Orgrim was shocked. He could not help but recall his late friend Durotan's complaint. I think it's Gul'dan and his warlocks who destroyed our world. You see, wherever they go, they use their dark powers. The land is drying up, the trees are withering, there's no grass, and there's no prey. Without prey, the orcs have no choice but to starve. He would never forget how many of his clansmen had been sacrificed on the way to the Dark Portal when his clan was migrating. Some were weak, some were sick, and some were severely injured by their prey. Once upon a time, the survival of the fittest rule of the orcs for thousands of years made him feel that this was only natural. Now that he thought about it, whether it was Durotan or Xueqi, what they said was undoubtedly true. When Orgrim first saw the Dark Portal, it was still a dirty swamp, but it was not lacking in life. But now, during the winter, he returned to the Dark Portal. That place had become a barren wasteland. Gray hills, crimson earth. There were no ordinary beasts, only monsters mutated by dark powers. Now that he thought about it, it should be the warlock's demonic power. Ha ha ha. Have you thought it through? You orcs are just a bunch of pitiful creatures being toyed with by the devil. All your glory is just a joke to embellish the devil's conspiracy. And the one who is playing with you is Gul'dan. Xueqi mercilessly spat out his poisonous tongue. Have you thought it through? Since you've thought it through, then scram. Orcs, go back to your world. Gul'dan. Orgrim waved his warhammer as he roared at the sky. I will use this to kill you. I will see you pay the price for your betrayal. When Orgrim shouted, there were a few in the Alliance who thought that they would not have to fight in the future. They were too naive. However, the Horde has no other choice. We will punish the traitors. But the orcs must continue to multiply. So, your world, we're definitely taking it. Xueqi's expression changed. Orgrim took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. I will lead my clan south. We will clear out the obstacles along the way and make sure that the road is clear. Once we deal with Gul'dan, we will return. When that time comes, it will be the end of the Alliance. While he doubted if his words would come true, and they were lucky to catch Lordaeron off guard this time, it would not happen a second time. But Orgrim had to say it. Even if they lost, they could not lose. They could not lose in terms of momentum. Since their goal was to destroy the other side, there was no need for peace, and there was no need to show weakness. Xueqi narrowed his eyes and said coldly, there is no need to wait for the future. Today, I want all of you to die here. Xueqi waved his hand. With the self-destructing demon spirit as the vanguard, the Alliance's army attacked again. But at this moment, the Horde had a clear goal, to break through. Even if Aurelia and the other rangers rained arrows on the Horde, and Marion and the other mages kept releasing magic attacks, the effect was limited. Every time they almost caught up to the Horde's formation, a small tribe would bring hundreds of people back and fight to the death. The Silver Hand led by Tyrion Fordring was, after all, only a group of city guards who could barely ride on horseback. They were trash in terms of combat power. After the horde paid the price of 5,000 lives, Orgrim led his army back into the Alterac Mountains. Orgrim retreated, but Xueqi was not happy at all, because he knew what the horde had sent to save them. On the western battlefield, the battle was still fierce. At this moment, Cudrin Wildhammer suddenly felt something flying towards him from the sky. He glanced at it and saw a black shadow flying down from the clouds above his head. At first, he thought that it was a warrior who came to report to him about the battle, but he immediately felt that the way this guy flew was not like a griffin. There were even more black shadows coming from the southeast. It seemed like they came from Lake Lord Emir, and they were probably flying at a higher altitude than them. But what were those things? But as the black shadows approached at high speed, they became bigger and bigger, to the point that they covered his vision. In the name of AI Ruefeng, Cudrin muttered to himself. He was completely intimidated by the largest among them. It had a slender body, a long tail and neck, and huge wings that occasionally flapped and extended high into the sky. Only one flying creature could have such a huge body. As the last of the clouds dispersed, the sun shone on them. The creature's body shone with a red light and was covered with dark red scales. Cudrin knew that his judgment was correct. It was a dragon. Cudrin's kill count had already reached double digits, but this one was completely different. Because if his eyes weren't playing tricks on him, this was an ancient colossal dragon whose size was comparable to the 5 great dragon kings. It was definitely over 10,000 years old. Chapter 455. What kind of joke was this? Even though Cudrin had killed so many red dragons controlled by the orcs, he never thought that he would have to face an opponent of this level one day. A young dragon under 1,000 years old could easily destroy a town. A young dragon under 10,000 years old could destroy a human army. But what about an ancient dragon that was more than 10,000 years old? The answer was enough to destroy a kingdom. This dragon was still far away, but it had already let out a loud roar. The surging sound waves caused the clouds to scatter, and the air around it to distort slightly. Its crimson-red wings spread out, and even the ground shook slightly. It was like a falling comet, heading straight for the Lordaeron soldiers who were blocking the horde's escape. Well, here's the problem. How could they stop an orc army that was charging at them at full speed? The answer was to form a solid infantry formation. How could they save more lives from the dragon breath of an ancient dragon? The answer was to disperse the formation, and turn it into a formation of scattered soldiers. Mograine knew how to deal with any given situation. Unfortunately, even someone as brave and skilled as Alexandros Mograine was dumbfounded when he suddenly encountered such a situation. It was not that he did not receive an emergency magic message from Xueqi, but an army of 100,000 soldiers could not retreat at will. On the noisy battlefield, it would take more than 10 minutes for the message to reach the front lines. Most of the soldiers' first reaction when they were suddenly asked to disperse while they were fighting well was to refuse. The task of blocking the orc army's retreat and killing the most orcs was personally given by King Terenas. King Terenas hated the orcs who burned the entire Silverpine forest to the ground. Even though most of the burning was done by the flamethrowers of the FFF team, without the orcs, there was no need for such cruel weapons. Well, in the end the orcs deserved to die. And as the core of the alliance, Lordaeron had to play a more important role, and not let Xueqi have all the glory. In the end, the first target of the dragon that came out of nowhere was Lordaeron's army. Even though Mograine had sounded the horn to disperse the battle, the dragon was still too fast. When the WYRM flew past at high speed, the wind pressure generated by the mere flapping of its wings was enough to create a terrifying storm in half of the Rotterdam Kingdom's army, causing everyone nearby to be blown off their feet and rolling on the ground like rolling gourds. The gigantic ballistae and catapults originally required 2 horses to pull and at least 10 engineers to operate. Now these huge war machines were like children's toys, falling apart with a single scratch from the dragon's claws. A catapult was caught in the air by the dragon's claws, and then thrown down wantonly. The wooden car disintegrated in mid-air, turning into countless pieces like scattered leaves in a storm. They smashed into the heads of the Lordaeron soldiers. All of a sudden, a ball of bluish-purple light that was not large but very eye-catching appeared in the sky above the Rotterdam Kingdom's army. It was the light of the portal opening, and an old mage with white hair and a white beard stepped out of the portal. In the next moment, he slowly descended and stood on a huge piece of ice that rose from the ground. In the Alliance, there were only 2 pharaoh with such an aura. The one who was good at playing with ice was naturally the strongest mage in the Dalajan, Antonidas. The old mage held onto his icicle staff and shouted into the sky, his angry voice immediately echoing in the air through the magic amplification. Tyrannies! Answer me, why do you have to stoop so low as to serve these despicable green worms? Forgive me, Alexstrasza is in their hands, I had no choice. Tyrannies' vertical pupils showed clear sorrow. With that, the ancient Wyrm Tyrannies spread its huge wings that had a wingspan of at least 30 to 40 meters, almost hovering in mid-air. A faint crimson light shone from its chest, spreading from its chest to its long neck. Then, a blazing dragon's breath came out of its mouth filled with sharp teeth. This dragon's breath was so huge that it felt like the whole sky had become a huge burning cloud, pressing heavily on the Scarlet Cross Army's heads. Almost at the same time, a huge ice tornado with a diameter of more than 100 meters rolled up without warning. The cold air quickly condensed into palm-sized icicles, mixed in with the tornado and rose into the sky, colliding with the dragon's breath that was like the flames of hell in the air. At that moment, the whole sky seemed to flash with a chaotic glow of white and red. The violent energy reaction stirred up a huge energy turbulence that completely enveloped the entire northern region of the battlefield. The thousands of people around Antonidas were instantly swept up by the terrible turbulence and died. This was not the end. The violent energy continued to spread in all directions. With the human and dragon as the center of the battle, time seemed to stop for a second, and then in the next second, time started to flow again. A powerful shock wave that could overturn everything standing within a kilometer began to sweep the entire battlefield. Well, a battle of hundreds of thousands of people had been messed up by these 2 guys who were completely cheating. This was not a battle of the same level at all. Mortals could not interfere in a battle of this level at all. At this moment, Xueqi arrived. We're late. Aurelia bit her lip. No, it's not too late. In fact, it's just in time. Xueqi handed an especially thick arrow to Aurelia and another to Sasha. HM? Can you shoot these 2 arrows at Tyrannies' eyelids? What's the use? Aurelia expressed her doubt. Even the eyes of a dragon have a membrane that's harder than steel. Even if our arrows hit it, we won't be able to hurt it. I didn't say we're going to kill Tyrannies. In fact, the one who was more doubtful was Xueqi. But Xueqi would not dare say it even if he died. In history, Tyrannies should have died in the Dragon Maw clan's grim battle fortress because he was too weak. Why was Tyrannies still alive and kicking, running over to the tribe's rescue team? But he still had to do what he had to do. Xueqi could not sit back and watch as the Alliance's army was beaten like dogs. Sasha, you go first. Okay. The silver-haired Sasha knocked an arrow. Just like her sister, Sasha's posture when she pulled the bow also had a valiant and heroic air. The Creator had given the High Elves the most beautiful appearance, and the long years of battle had trained the Windrunner sisters' unparalleled heroic spirit on the battlefield. A strong wind blew, and Sasha's wind arrow flew out. The arrow's trajectory was so light, like a piece of cotton in the wind. Tyrannies, who was in a fierce battle, did not notice the arrow until it exploded less than half a meter away from his eyeball, releasing a blinding light. Flash grenade. Chapter 456. Any creature, as long as they weren't blind, would naturally close their eyes in the face of strong light. Tyrannies closed his eyes. Just for a moment. At the same time, Aurelia's double arrow arrived. Poof! With a muffled sound, the thing on the arrow exploded above the dragon's eyelid, and a layer of strange substance seemed to cover the dragon's eyelid. At this moment, Tyrannies suddenly shrank his neck. He didn't know what it was, but he instinctively felt that something was wrong. The ancient dragon's incomparable experience told him that touching this thing would cause him to lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. He flinched. Aurelia's mouth opened wide. She couldn't hide her surprise and regret. Her confident attack was actually dodged by Tyrannies with unparalleled reflexes. It was supposed to be like this. However, 2 hands of magic suddenly appeared above the 2 blobs of liquid that exploded. One beat. Smack! The 2 balls of liquid were slapped onto Tyrannies' eyelid at lightning speed. For an ancient colossal dragon, the long years had allowed him to train and evolve everything he had. The scales of young dragons were soft, and even the most ordinary human weapons could easily cause fatal damage to them. As time passed, the scales would become harder. After 1,000 years, the scales would become even harder than steel. Unless it was an epic weapon, it would be impossible to break through the tough scales of a dragon. Dragon's skin was similar. The older a dragon was, the thicker and more resilient its skin was. This made dragons one of the most terrifying creatures on the planet. To be honest, mages below the level of Radiant Moon could barely cause any damage to an ancient dragon. In Duke's memory, all the bosses of the dragon race in the game had to have at least 25 companions like him who could not be killed before they could attempt to take down the boss. How to deal with an ancient dragon that was likely to go berserk became a difficult question. He couldn't beat it, but he couldn't drag it out either. The answer was revealed. It was glue. This was something Duke accidentally discovered when he went to Ironstove Castle at the beginning of the year to inspect the creations of the gnomes who were courting death. The gnome named it BBBBB Super Glue. Of course, Duke didn't mind calling him BB Glue. It was actually a kind of glue that solidified instantly. Originally, the gnome was going to use it to repair the gnome aircraft, but because it solidified too quickly, it was rejected by all the gnome technicians. In the end, Duke only used 5 gold coins to buy a large barrel. Now it was time to use it on Talanis. Flash Grenade. Forced Talanis to close his eyes. Random BB Glue. Could prevent the dragon from opening its eyes. Talanis had lived for tens of thousands of years and had never seen anything like this. For a moment, he thought he had gone blind. However, the rays of light that seeped through the gap in his eyelids told him that it was only his eyelids that were glued shut. "Help me!" A magical message was sent to Antonidas, and the Kirin Tor Council immediately understood. Talanis stopped its dragon breath and tried to fly higher to avoid the possible attack. However, he did not notice that a huge ice ball was forming at high speed 100 meters above his head. Condense! Condense! Condense again! The heaven-defying effect of the Crown of Ice magic circuit was revealed at this moment. With the cooperation from the Alterac Palace, Antonidas and Duke's coordination was even more pure. Basically, he did the work, and Duke controlled it. Use the sonic arrow to disrupt the shooting. Duke shouted. In less than 2 seconds, 2 huge explosions exploded in Talanis' ears. Bzzz. Talanis' 5 senses were all messed up. Giant dragons were the true overlords of the sky. The sudden blindness would only affect the giant dragons temporarily. However, the wind-type sonic arrow that had been strengthened by the storm altar was different. The sudden explosion of the arrow not only disrupted Talanis' hearing, but it also made him unable to feel the flow of the wind. It could be said that at this moment, his sight, hearing and senses were temporarily disabled. Without hesitation, the huge ice ball fell from the sky. With a powerful boom and an unparalleled momentum, as if it was a perfect trajectory that had been calculated thousands of times, the ice ball actually hit Talanis' skull right as he shook his head in pain. Bam! With a loud bang, the ancient dragon was smashed to the point of seeing stars. It fell. Get out of the way! The people and orcs below, as long as they could react, all revealed horrified expressions. The dragon fell. At that moment, it was as if there was a terrible earthquake near the point of impact. The ground, which was supposed to be extremely thick, was like a piece of rotten meat that had its bones pulled out. After a loud bang, a huge pit that was at least 10 meters deep was shoveled out by the tumbling dragon. The ground on both sides of the pit suddenly bulged, sending people and things flying into the sky. The surging shockwave spread in all directions, throwing more people into the air. Even Mograine himself was sent flying by the huge force along with his horse, and then fell heavily to the ground. The only fortunate thing was that he separated from his beloved horse in midair, which saved him from being crushed by the warhorse. Grom Hellscream, who was attacking fiercely at the front lines, was also hit. The place where Talanis fell was too unlucky. It happened to be aimed at him. As a result, the great hero of the tribe was sent tumbling backward like a rolling gourd, knocking over countless of his own people. He rolled for about 100 meters before he finally managed to stop the momentum of his backward motion. Talanis' fall caused the entire front line to fall into chaos. High Lord Mogaine's flag fell, and the High Lord himself temporarily lost contact. This caused the nobles at the back to panic, and the noble army they led was even more chaotic. Even though they were far away and received much less counterattacks, they still fell left and right, unable to form a proper formation. At this moment, the orcs exerted their strength. In a chaotic battle, The unique characteristics of the orcs' individual combat abilities were magnified almost limitlessly in such a situation. Many orcs did not even get up before attacking the humans with whatever weapons they had at hand. Hammers, daggers, or even fists and fangs. They could deal fatal blows to the humans who were physically weaker. Many of the human warriors were sent flying again before they could even stand up, falling heavily onto their own comrades. Loktar Ogre. The loud and clear slogan was answered by hundreds of people. Hundreds of people responded. Mograine had no choice but to blow the bugle and order his subordinates to form small defensive formations. The result was that the army barely managed to survive, but at least 30,000 orcs broke through the encirclement and entered the vast forest of Tirisful Forest. Tyrannes, who was temporarily blinded, struggled to fly away. Chapter 457. The defense of Lordaeron was over. It ended with the Alliance's victory. However, this was not a satisfactory result for either side. They did not win big when they should, and they did not lose when they should. Orgrim retreated back to the Alterac Mountains. It was obvious that he would choose to pass through Alterac and return to the hinterlands. He would then board the ship at the sea cliff and return to the southern continent to find Gul'dan. As for Grom and his Warsong tribe beast men, their whereabouts were a mystery. Grom was no longer as aggressive as before. He purposely avoided all human towns and restrained his subordinates, hiding in the boundless forest. Everyone knew what kind of damage 30,000 beast men could do. If left alone, they would be able to destroy the only core area of Lordaeron. It was not a good feeling to have enemies hiding right under their noses. King Tyrannes came to find Xueqi almost as soon as the battle ended. Please. We must not let these evil green-skinned beasts go. I need the support of the Elven Rangers, including Quelled the Loss, and your direct ranger. If possible, I hope you can personally lead the attack on this tribe. I'm sorry, but I have more important things to do. We must first send people to save the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Otherwise, when Tyrannes comes again, no one will be able to fight him. Your Majesty, that's a real ancient red dragon that can destroy a kingdom all by itself. Tyrannes was shocked. Didn't you and Sir Antonidas work together to defeat that giant lizard? No. He obviously held back. I can feel that he doesn't want to fight the Alliance. Antonidas' words helped Xueqi out of the situation. Xueqi suddenly said, Actually, I used Aurelia's Whisper of the Wind to tell Tyrannes that the Alliance will save the Red Dragon Queen as soon as possible. I hope he won't attack us with full force. What an explosive news. A real dragon. Noxus stroked his beard. In order to maintain morale and deceive the people, they could of course say that the Great Alliance hero Antonidas and Duke Marcus worked together to defeat the Red Dragon. But after hearing this inside story, every king and general's face darkened. That was an existence that violated the rules. It could render all strategies and tactics useless. In the face of this level of power, the battle between humans and beast men was not even worth mentioning. Ever since Xueqi had crossed over to the world of Azeroth with the identity of a poor college student, he had been prepared to fight all kinds of unscientific non-human monsters in the future after he had gained a foothold. For example, dragons, elemental kings, ancient gods. Unfortunately, when it came down to it, Xueqi still felt that he was not ready. After all, in the game before he transmigrated, any giant dragon would be a proper game template. The problem was that he had transmigrated here alone. This was not like the game, where he could gather 25 companions who could revive infinitely and form a party to fight a boss. The only thing that could make Xueqi feel at ease was that he now had Aurelia and other strong people who had stepped into the realm of heroes to help him. Cudrin Wildhammer stroked his orange-red, well-combed beard. Actually, we can also think on the bright side. If we can really save Alexstrasza, maybe the Red Dragon army will side with the Alliance. After all, these big lizards were forced to fight with the Alliance before. King Salas sighed. The problem is that we don't even know where the Red Dragon Queen is. King Lang raised his hand. According to the intelligence of my subordinates, it is very likely that she is in the wetlands, in the dwarven fortress of Grim Battle. Xueqi had been hesitating about whether to reveal the truth. Seeing that the bandits from MI7 in Stormwind were so powerful, he was relieved. Salas was very excited. If they could deal with the Red Dragon Queen, the pressure on Torrential Fortress would definitely be greatly reduced. Really? Then can the Special Ops team from Stormwind? Lang smiled bitterly and shook his head. My people lack funds. They have already done their best to get this information. Then leave it to the elite secret forces of Lordaeron to handle this matter. King Terenas was full of confidence. Xueqi really did not want to hurt Terenas's confidence. Regardless of whether Terenas's bandits could deal with the mysterious demon soul, according to the original history, it was the famous Black Dragon King, Neltharion, who was now known as Wings of Death, who had really tricked Alexstrasza into the hands of the Horde. Would Wings of Death let Terenas's silly bandits save the Red Dragon Queen before he achieved his goal? Xueqi could almost imagine the tragedy that would befall the elite bandits of Lordaeron. Unfortunately, he could not reveal the truth. After the leaders of the Alliance thought that they had settled the matter of the Red Dragon Army, the meeting entered the main topic: how to wipe out the Horde. Under the premise that they were united against a common enemy, the meeting went very smoothly. There was no more wrangling and shoving like when the Alliance was first established. The main goal was as follows: push the front line to the Dwarven Kingdom of Cosmodan as soon as possible before winter, and rescue the besieged Iron Stove Castle. At this moment, the hundreds of thousands of Alliance troops gathered in Lordaeron were divided into 3 fronts. Close to 200,000 Lordaeron troops, with the help of Quel Salis and Xueqi's Elven Rangers, tried to wipe out the Horde that had escaped to the Tirisfal Forest. Even if they could not wipe out all of them, they had to reduce the number of Horde in the area to an acceptable range. For example, below 3,000. Terenas planned to surround and annihilate these orcs with a large army and a high bounty. The second route was the Griffin Legion and the Wild Hammer Dwarves Griffin Knights from the hinterlands. There was a total of 50,000 soldiers chasing after the remnants of Orgrim's army to ensure that they were eliminated, or at least to drive them out of Lordaeron permanently. This route was not difficult. Unless Orgrim gave up on killing Gul'dan, it was basically an armed parade to send the Horde out of the Lordaeron continent. The third route was the armies of the other countries. They would be led by Lothar back to the Wall of Thoradin, hoping to recover the fallen earthy highlands within 2 months, and drive the Horde back to the south bank of Sodder Bridge. After the meeting, Xueqi rubbed his eyebrows. The second battle of the Dark Portal was finally coming to an end. Back at the state guest house, Illyria massaged Duke's shoulders to relax. How did elves grow? Illyria's fingers didn't even have a callus after a long time of drawing a bow and knocking an arrow. Just as Xueqi was about to say something, a shocking news came. The Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsus Fail, was critically ill. Chapter 458. Alonso's Fail was a transcendent existence to the entire Alliance. As the national religion of the 7 kingdoms of the Alliance, he was definitely a great figure who could be on an equal footing with any king. At this time, the Alliance had just seen the light of victory, and was about to launch a counterattack. However, the news of Archbishop Alonso's illness at this critical juncture cast a shadow over the Alliance's victory. It was a huge blow to Anduin, be it publicly or privately. Publicly, it was because Alonso's had promised that he would mobilize his believers to raise funds for the reconstruction of Stormwind after they reclaimed their territory in Stormwind. Once the most prestigious Alonso's died of illness, the revival of the Stormwind Kingdom would most likely be delayed for a very long time. Privately, Anduin and Alonso's had been friends for more than 20 years. Now that his old friend was critically ill, Anduin was naturally anxious. When Xueqi arrived, the kings who came to visit had already changed a few times. At this moment, there were only 2 high-ranking priests from the Church of Holy Light, Anduin and Uther, accompanying Alonso's. When Xueqi arrived with Gavin Rad, he immediately discovered that the atmosphere was not normal. What's going on? Is it a disease or something? Xueqi did not believe that it was a disease. It was because the priests knew how to get rid of diseases and remove diseases. In this era, the most powerful doctors were the priests. Not to mention Archbishop Alonso's Fail, who was at the top of all the priests. Secondly, there was the hospital bed. It was a very special hospital bed. Rather than calling it a hospital bed, it was more appropriate to call it a low water tank. Because Alonso's was sleeping on it, most of his body was submerged in the sparkling holy water. Only his head was propped up against the pillow. Beside Alonso's, there was a priest who was continuously casting spells to dispel the filthy smell that flowed out of the Archbishop's mouth and nose. Anduin leaned over and whispered to Xueqi. Alonso seemed to have touched the blood of the demon in the corpse of a tribal chief when he was studying the corpse. Then, he might have triggered a curse in his body. He is now in a terrible state of continuous weakness. Seeing Xueqi enter, Alonso's opened his half-closed eyes. All of you leave. Only Uther and Duque will be here. Anduin wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he went out with the two high-ranking priests. Only Uther was left, purifying the air in the room with low-level dispelling diseases. Duque was a little hesitant. The historical Fail did not die so quickly. After winning the war against the Horde, Fail also raised a lot of money to build the Cathedral of Light in the rebuilt new Stormwind city. Hence, he became the Archbishop of both Lordaeron and Stormwind Kingdom. In order to commend his devotion to the Church of Holy Light and his contribution to the reconstruction of Stormwind, a statue of Alonsus Fail was erected in front of the Cathedral of Light. The inscription on the statue praised Fail's great contribution to the Alliance in the Second War, raising funds to help rebuild Stormwind City and Northshire Abbey. Fail did not die until the Third War of the Dark Portal, which was before the undead scourge invaded Lordaeron. The cause of his death was unknown. He had never heard of Fail dying. He thought of a very scary possibility. In the end he still asked, "Sir Fail, was it that day at the Storm Altar?" "That's right." If there was a variable related to Alonso's, it would be that day when Duque stole the fruits of Gul'dan's labor. He found this archbishop to help purify the Storm Altar that had been corroded by the demonic power. Alonso smiled. "My dear disciple, please swear in the name of the Holy Light that you will not tell anyone about what you saw and heard today." The muscles on Uther's firm and devout face twitched. "I swear in the name of the Holy Light." Alonso's then turned to look at Duque. "I will answer your question. Yes and no." "Yes. Also no?" Duque was a little confused. "I have spent most of my life spreading the Holy Light, hoping that the Holy Light can drive away all darkness and evil. But I have discovered a fact. Whether the Holy Light drives away evil or darkness devours light, it is a relative process." Relative. That's right. The more devout and pure the soul, the more holy light it produces. But only the side with the greater quantity and quality will be the victor of this battle. I did inhale too much demonic power that day. I thought I could purify it with my own power, but obviously I failed. But that's not important. Not important. Stop joking, Your Excellency. Alonso's reached out from the holy water and waved, stopping Duque from continuing. "I won't die so easily. As long as you send me back to the Holy Light Cathedral in Stratholme, I will be able to survive with the help of the holy water. At most, I will lose some vitality. This is not the time for me to sleep. The most important thing is you, Duque." "Me?" Duque was stunned. "Yes, you." Alonso's pointed at Duque's chest. "In this period of time, you have undoubtedly proven to everyone that you are the brightest star in the Alliance. Your wisdom and foresight almost make me suspect that you are a prophet sent by the creation titans." "Ah. Fine, you are half right. But I am also most worried about you. Compared to your powerful magic power and wise mind, your will is too weak. If some evil existence wants to deal with you, you are the kind of person who is most vulnerable to corruption." Duque, who had been told the truth, felt like his face was on fire. Yes, he was just an ordinary university student before he transmigrated. Without experiencing the ups and downs of life, they lacked enough sharpening and life experiences. This was his biggest shortcoming, and it was a weakness that he could not solve at the moment. Therefore, Duque's fear spell was a sure hit. If not for the system elf, he would have died long ago. "I will be careful." No, it is not enough to just be careful. You need a firm belief. Otherwise, if you become the next Savis, that will be the Alliance's nightmare. Savis was once the leader of the High Elves, the core leader of the Kaldorii civilization in ancient Kalimdor. His status was second only to Queen Azhara. Afterwards, his soul was corrupted by the ancient god Enzos, which led to the first Burning Legion invasion in the world of Azeroth. Alonso's words were very heavy. What else could Duque say? He could only pinch his nose and accept it. He received a copy of the teachings of the Holy Light from the Archbishop. Before leaving, Alonso's grabbed Duque's hand and said solemnly, "Be careful of Gul'dan." Chapter 459. Be careful of Gul'dan? Duque couldn't believe Alonso's warning. If the history he was familiar with was right, Gul'dan was obsessed with something even more important. When Gul'dan was on Draenor, he was still a genius shaman. His master was recognized as the strongest shaman in many clans, the chief of the Shadowmoon clan, Zul. But for greater power, he quickly abandoned his master and joined the Burning Legion's commander, Jaden. Now, the reason he dared to abandon his clan and become a traitor was actually because of the same reason. Power. When Gul'dan found out that Sargeras had been beaten into the abyss by Xueqi, Anduin and Medivh, he was arrogant enough to think he could open the tomb of Sargeras, dig him out, and steal the power of a fallen titan who had killed many creation titans. According to the course of history, when he and his clansmen opened the door to the dungeon where Sargeras' tomb rose from the bottom of the sea, Gul'dan found only crazy demons waiting for him. In the end, Gul'dan would pay the price for his greed. He was torn to pieces by the crazy demons he released. In the beginning, Xueqi was still worried that Gul'dan would target him and give him a cursing look. But now, in Xueqi's eyes, Gul'dan was a little prince who was courting death. It was enough to remove him from the list of threats. Xueqi was wrong, very wrong. After Aurelia and Servanas left, Xueqi had nothing to do. Leaving the army wasn't as simple as being a ranger. With their bows and arrows, the rangers could go on a march as they pleased. As experts in surviving in the wild, as long as there was a forest, these rangers would not starve to death. But Xueqi's army couldn't. Ever since they left Hillsbrad and entered the hinterlands, the Griffin Legion had been fighting for thousands of miles without a good rest. Broken armor, medicine and treatment of the wounded were all paid for by the Lordaeron Legion. And when they left the human settlements and entered the forest, they also had to prepare large amounts of rations. Reginald, the future Grand Marshal, would naturally be the one to do it. Xueqi was sleeping. Then Xueqi was shot. Xueqi rarely dreamed, but when he did, Xueqi's dreams were often more realistic than most people's. Other people's dreams were often fragmented, with all kinds of absurd scenes and no sound. Xueqi's dream was different. Not only did it have sounds and images, but it also had a complete plot. Now, what Xueqi saw was the following magical scene. This was a night sky that was completely different from that of Earth. The entire universe was like an incomparably huge chaotic sphere, firmly covering the Azeroth. In his field of vision, there was nothing but pitch-black chaos. The dark chaotic clouds kept rolling, and from time to time, a long comet with a green tail would break through the thick clouds and descend to the ground. Xueqi stood on the scorched ground and stared at the night sky, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the sky. It sounded like a heavy bomber flying over his head, letting out an ear-piercing screech that came closer and closer. It was as if a mysterious force was pulling the scene from a landscape film to a war film. The sound quickly turned into a shrill sound that shook the eardrums and made them bleed and deaf. Duke only saw a huge meteor burning with pale green flames descending from the sky, piercing through his left vision and out of his right vision in the blink of an eye, falling straight into the crystal forest. What the F***CK? Xueqi only had time to groan in dissatisfaction before the chaotic turbulence with countless sharp rocks and debris hit Xueqi's face, throwing him to the ground. The sound of the meteorite hitting the ground was endless, and the rising dust covered almost his entire field of vision. Xueqi raised his head and supported his hands. When he crawled up from the ground, he felt a burning pain on his face. He touched it with his hand, and the pain went deep into his heart. F***CK. Such a deep wound, and so much blood, I'm disfigured. A series of heavy footsteps that shook the earth came, attracting all of Xueqi's attention. A huge stone giant whose body was burning with green flames stood proudly less than 2 meters in front of Xueqi. Xueqi looked up blankly and saw the emotionless inorganic eyes on the skeletal head of the giant. To be precise, it was not a pair of eyes, but more like a gathering point of some kind of energy. It was evil and exuded a cold light that did not match its high body temperature. Not only the eyes, but all the places that were not covered by the skull were burning with green flames. Hellfire. It was a terrifying war machine. Ordinary people without special abilities would die if they were to fight it. It was more than 3 stories tall, and just standing there was a sense of oppression. Bang bang bang. There was another loud sound, and Xueqi's body was surrounded by hellfire. That kind of earth-shattering pressure, that kind of blazing heat that made it hard to breathe just by standing nearby, that kind of invisible spiritual pressure, caused Duke's expression to change greatly. He did not know how the hellfire came about. He only knew that his life was in danger. Human, kneel. Kneel to the Burning Legion's master. Otherwise, I will let your soul suffer under the eternal flames for eternity. Kneel? Burning Legion's master? Isn't that the Sargeras that I put down? The trace of fear in Duque's heart suddenly disappeared with this line that sounded so funny to Duque. Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. Your boss will kneel when he sees me. Just you? Duque stood up proudly, his eyes filled with clear disdain. Yes. That was contempt. The contempt that a higher being had for a lower being. A second later, Duque made his move. No one knew how Duque did it. Very suddenly, 2 40-meter-long golden battleship blades appeared in Duque's hands. Oh la la la! Eat my meteor blast slash! Duque shouted the name of the unknown move. A circle of light that was even brighter than the flames flashed. Hundreds of hellfire were kicked over like building blocks, exploding and disappearing. Duque laughed coldly. Your so-called terror can only scare ignorant dogs. Sorry, it won't work on me. In front of Duque, a shadow was slowly condensing into a shape, quietly wriggling. Very quickly, it became a guy that Duque was familiar with, the tribe's demigod warlock Gul'dan. He had a hunched back, and his coarse mouth was open, revealing a mouth full of smelly fangs. Whoosh! Duke Marcus, you really are an interesting human. Since I can't corrode and control you mentally, don't blame me. Oh, strictly speaking, I didn't do it. I just activated a small backdoor that Sargeras left in your body. The next moment, Duque suddenly woke up from his dream. He saw Gavin Rad rushing into his room with a face full of panic, and Vanessa pulling out the dagger from her thigh. Then, Duque slowly froze himself in front of them. His fingers were frozen, his breath froze, and his hair started to turn white. Chapter 460. Duque suddenly remembered what was going on. He'd always thought that as long as he didn't fight directly, a superboss like Gul'dan wouldn't notice him. Actually, Duque had definitely taken it for granted. He wasn't a nobody. He'd become a deputy commander of the Alliance and had so many outstanding achievements. There was no way Gul'dan hadn't heard of him. It wasn't like Duque didn't know that Gul'dan had tried to enter a dream to steal Mediva's power and pry into Mediva's knowledge. Coincidentally, Gul'dan had been stabbed by Duque at that time. Gul'dan, who was in the mental link, had fallen into a coma, causing the Shadow Council to be raided by Orgrim. But humans were like this. They always had some wishful thinking. Now, Duque had paid a terrible price for this wishful thinking. Curse. Yes, it was the gift that Sargeras had left for Duque before he'd been sent into the abyss. At that time, this curse had been split into 3 parts. The biggest part had been taken by Alan, and the result was that it had turned to dust. About a third had been taken by Anju and Lothar. Duke's injuries were probably less than a tenth of the total. The effect had indeed been split, but Duque had forgotten that he was the main target of the curse. The curse hadn't actually been removed. It was only because he hadn't injected any more power to continue the curse that it seemed to be ineffective. Duque really hadn't expected that Gul'dan would trigger this thing when he'd failed to forcibly control his soul in the dream. He'd screwed him over. At that moment on the ship, Gul'dan opened his eyes. What an interesting fellow. Is he really only 16? He actually resisted my mental intimidation. The 2-headed ogre hero Google touched his head with both hands at the same time. Apart from that Mediv, there's actually a human who can resist your mental attack? Gul'dan stroked his short beard. No, I haven't done anything to this Duque. It's not that I can't, but that I'm not in the mood. In my opinion, to corrupt this kid's mind and control him, it would only take a little time. Of course I can also destroy his soul. If I do that, Orgrim might benefit from it. Then why do you want to kill him now? Gul'dan was furious. The stupid alliance actually let Orgrim's main force escape. If I don't control Duque and use the alliance to weaken the horde, Orgrim might catch up to me and disrupt my plan. I have people from 2 clans here, so I can't walk fast at all. It's a pity that the control failed. Otherwise, I'd have plenty of time to explore Sargeras' tomb. In reality, Duque also realized that Gul'dan probably wanted to use brute force to subdue him and then control his soul, turning him into a puppet. With a vice-commander of the alliance as a puppet, whether it was to plot against Orgrim or for Gul'dan to rule the world in the future, it would be very convenient. But Gul'dan didn't expect Duque to resist his soul pressure. In reality, when breaking through the nightmare realm he had created, Gul'dan had suffered some damage to his soul. Otherwise, why would Gul'dan be so embarrassed and angry that he triggered the curse to kill Duque? No matter what, Xueqi was in trouble. After coming to this world, Xueqi had been training his body. But now, a single curse had caused Xueqi to become extremely weak. No! Xueqi screamed in his heart, but his mouth couldn't make a sound. This wasn't the ending he wanted. Through a series of struggles, his career was already on the right track, and he had reached a high position in the Alliance. After experiencing the cruel second battle at the Dark Portal, his influence in the Alliance would reach its peak. Cultivating a godly technique, letting his name resound in heaven and hell, marrying a rich and beautiful woman, reaching the peak of life, this was the ending that a transmigrator should have. But what the hell was this? That curse was madly absorbing his life force again? No, I can't die here. Xueqi tried to use his magic, such as Ice Barrier, to use the absolute ice element to dispel all negative effects. But he couldn't activate the instant magic that he had tried thousands of times. Not only that, he couldn't contact the system elf either. Xueqi tried to do anything but failed. Only his eyeballs could move. Yes, he was paralyzed. Both his body and soul were like this. He faintly knew that this was the soul attack that Gul'dan had given him before dispelling the dream realm. Now, Xueqi's mind became even more blank. He could only watch as Vanessa screamed in shock and approached him, while Gavin Rad reached out his large hand to touch his face. This first contact allowed him to feel something for the first time since he was paralyzed. Gavin Rad's hand was filled with holy light, but the places he touched felt like they were being burned by fire. It was painful, so painful that his brain felt like it was melting. In his daze, Xueqi only felt that a deep wound had appeared on his face. Exorcism! Gavin Rad let out a thunderous roar. Xueqi seemed to have woken up. He subconsciously raised his hand to touch his face, only to find that there was no wound at all. Did you hear what I said? Xueqi, don't move and focus on receiving my holy light. Gavin Rad turned and glanced at Alugia, who had rushed out of the room next door and shouted, "Inform Mother immediately. It's best if you call Antonidas too." Xueqi opened his heart, allowing the sea of holy light to rush into his body and soul. Whoosh! 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 Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale, inhale again and exhale again. Originally, the beating of the heart and breathing of the lungs were absolutely normal things for a living person, but for Xueqi, they had become movements that he had to use his own will to forcibly command his body to do. Moreover, every movement was accompanied by pain. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans emerged from Xueqi's forehead and all the pores on his body, rolling down. Vanessa, who was waiting on him at the side, could not get close to him no matter how agile she was. The intelligent Alugia was the first to inform Antonidas. This top human mage had rushed over quickly, and even brought Wother with him through a teleportation door. Fortunately, Xueqi had taken Gavin Rad as his bodyguard, and fortunately, a few key figures in the Alliance were free, so Xueqi's condition quickly stabilized. After a consultation with a group of big shots other than Alonso's, they came to a shocking conclusion. If left alone, Xueqi's life force would be depleted within a month, and he would die of exhaustion. Chapter 461. Xueqi might die. The Alliance had been in shock for the past few days. Alonso's Fail's illness had only surprised the higher-ups of the Alliance. After all, the Church of Holy Light's influence was only in Rotterdam and Stormwind. There were Church of Holy Light preaching in other countries, but most of them were non-believers. When the kings heard about Alonso's, they only said, "I'm sorry to hear this." But Xueqi was different. Other than King Eden of Alterac, who had already passed away, almost every king knew how to use his troops. They were very clear that compared to the upright and courageous Anduin Lothar, who was more straightforward, Duke was the glue and command tower that united the various countries of the Alliance. Terina's Lordaeron was the target of public criticism. Everyone knew that Terina's motives were not pure. No, it should be said that Terina's wanted to use this opportunity to become the second emperor of Soridon. Everyone knew that. If they sent too few troops, it would be Rotterdam's fault. If they sent too many troops and money, they would have to worry about whether it was Rotterdam's conspiracy. At the very least, it would be a form of charity. No kingdom would feel comfortable. With Xueqi around, the kings were much more at ease. The troops, manpower, and resources that needed to be sent were definitely sufficient and on time. And everyone could see that Xueqi's insistence on killing was the key to the Alliance's strength. If Anduin was the spiritual leader of the alliance, then Xueqi would be the brains of the alliance, second only to Anduin. Now, just as the alliance was about to turn to the counterattack phase, there was suddenly news of Xueqi's illness. The kings were really anxious. Visiting the Archbishop of Holy Light was a matter of the leaders of the various countries rushing to express their condolences. But what about Xueqi? A state guesthouse almost turned into a throne conference. In the end, they had no choice but to move Xueqi to the Rotterdam Palace. Otherwise, how would it look if 6 or 7 kings surrounded a small state guesthouse? Even so, even King Daelin Proudmoore, who was in charge of the navy, had rushed over on a griffin. It was clear how important Xueqi was. To everyone's surprise, they saw a different Xueqi, but not a dying Xueqi. His short hair was slightly gray, as if it was dyed, and there was a small tuft of silver in front of his forehead. Apart from that, there was nothing else. It didn't seem like a big deal, but Antonidas, who was the most authoritative expert on curses, told all the kings that it wasn't that simple. Right now, Xueqi is like a bucket with many holes. His life force is draining away with every passing moment. In 10 days, you will see a 30-year-old Xueqi. 20 days later, he would be 40. 1 month later, he won't be 50 years old, but dead. Is there no way to plug the holes or something? King Lang was the most nervous. For the others, losing a Xueqi was the same as losing a commander of the alliance. The main force of the tribe had been almost wiped out. As long as one wasn't too stupid, they could win the next battle. The only difference was how many lives were lost and how much time was spent. But for Stormwind, it was very likely that they would lose the most important cornerstone of the kingdom for the next 30 years, the pillar of the country. Antonidas shook his head regretfully. A single curse is like a ball of string wrapped around a string. No matter how messy it is, it can be taken out along the string. But Xueqi's situation is like a ball of string of the same color rolled together. I can't find a clue at all. This is a hole in the soul created by different methods from many worlds. I can't do anything about it. Most importantly, this is a curse cast by a demigod mage. Could a mere Breaking Dawn mage deal with the work of a world guardian? Be it Lang or Anduin, their mouths were filled with bitterness. They didn't expect that after going 1 round, it was still the fault of their dead old friend, Medivh. This was the greatest irony in the world. The temperature in the air gradually dropped. The atmosphere lingering in the air was the same. Almost everyone felt as if they couldn't breathe. That hateful Gul'dan. Anduin gritted his teeth and punched the wall. At this time, it was Xueqi who spoke. Actually, the situation might not be as serious as you think it is. Not serious? Then what is serious? King Lang's eyes were red, and even his voice sounded like he was about to cry. Lang didn't cry when he lost the land passed down by his ancestors. Lang didn't cry when Stormwind City, which symbolized the sovereignty of the entire kingdom, fell. Now that Duke was in critical condition, Ryan was crying. From the beginning, his eyes were red to the end, and it only took 2 seconds for him to cry. Rascal, you're about to die. I originally wanted you to help William and let him restore the glory of Stormwind. I originally thought that if it didn't work out, I would let you. Before he could finish his sentence, Anduin patted Lang's shoulder and stopped him. Listen to Xueqi first. Xueqi heaved a sigh of relief. I guess the power of the mortal world can't do anything about this. When Xueqi said this, the king's heart sank. Fortunately, I still have one last hope. The Red Dragon Queen. Alexstrasza? Antonidas's slightly cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. Yes. Why didn't I think of her? There's hope for Xueqi. Oh, at least there's hope. What? What? The kings immediately perked up. Not every king was so knowledgeable. They might have received good education from a young age, but most of it was about governing a country, martial arts, and the cultivation of a knight. Only a knowledgeable old mage like Antonidas could possibly know about this. After Antonidas' explanation, the kings then realized that Alexstrasza was actually so powerful. In the Battle of the Ancient Times, in order to prevent Sargeras from entering this world through the portal of the Well of Eternity, the spell whirlpool created by the High Elves in the Well of Eternity exploded. The collapse of the Well of Eternity caused a strong earthquake. This earthquake destroyed the skeleton of the world. Nearly 80% of the land of the Azeroth continent was torn apart, leaving only a few fragmented continents around the newly formed ocean. The Giver of Life, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, cast a magic acorn in the center of the Well of Eternity. The acorn began to sprout once it came into contact with the lake full of magic power, and grew into a huge oak tree. The roots of the tree went deep into the lake, and the huge canopy almost covered the entire sky. This huge oak tree was the eternal symbol of the harmonious relationship between the night elves and nature. The life energy it emitted could slowly spread and heal the wounds of the entire world. The night elves named their world tree Nordrassil, which meant crown of the sky in the night elves' language. Chapter 462. Since the Red Dragon Queen could even create the world tree, it would be a piece of cake for her to solve a small curse. Xueqi can be saved. No one said it out loud, but that was what everyone thought. Terenas even hinted to Lang with a smile that if his people saved the Red Dragon Queen this time, Lang and Xueqi would owe Lordaeron a huge favor. This was obviously taking advantage of the situation. Using saving the Red Dragon Queen as a bargaining chip to force the recovered Xueqi to join Lordaeron was a despicable move. If Lang was a ruthless person, he would definitely not let anyone else get the Red Dragon Queen if he couldn't get it himself. Lang was a merciful king. When Terenas made this request, he wasn't thinking about Xueqi's usefulness, but what Xueqi had done for Stormwind and the royal family of Rin. Lang gritted his teeth and said, "As long as your people save Alexstrasza and let her save Xueqi's life, and Xueqi is willing to pledge his loyalty to you, I won't object to his transfer. However, Xueqi is a real talent. I hope that Xueqi can at least get the status of a Grand Duke in Lordaeron. Also, no matter what, Karazhan is a territory that I personally gave to Xueqi. I will never take it back." Terenas was overjoyed. He had only wanted to save the Red Dragon Queen, but he didn't expect to get the chance to buy one and get one free. Think about it. The Red Dragon army was willing to submit themselves to the filthy beast men and become their mounts for their queen. If Lordaeron saved the Red Dragon Queen, wouldn't they at least be able to form an army of dragon knights? Coupled with the magic books that Xueqi and Xueqi had in the Karazhan Grand Library, one could imagine that in less than 10 years, Lordaeron would become the most powerful and overwhelming country in the entire Eastern Kingdom. Perhaps without the need for war, they could borrow the name of the alliance to annex the various countries and complete Thoradin the Greats. No, even greater than Thoradin the Greats. That was because the alliance included 2 dwarf kingdoms and 1 high elf kingdom. While King Terenas was making his plans, Duke was making all sorts of arrangements as if he was making arrangements for his death. He had gathered almost everyone around him. First, he had Lang issue an official king's decree, announcing that Duke Fairville of the Bloodsail Pirates had officially become the Duke of Stormwind. He also had the various kings sign the decree in secret, confirming that the Bloodsail Pirates had committed crimes against the alliance. As a price, all the fleets belonging to Stormwind would be under the command of King Dallin until the war with the orcs officially ended. Even if they were all used as cannon fodder, they would have no regrets. In fact, everyone knew that Dallin would not go to such extremes. Then, just in case, Xueqi had Duke Barav transfer the deed of South Shore to Elugia, and registered Elugia as the Countess of Stormwind. This was to leave a way out for the Barav family. Elugia's 2 younger brothers were still missing, but this could become the Barav family's biggest weakness. The alliance still needed Alterac. Alterac's soldiers had fought bravely to clear the name of their country. But what about after the war? Elugia glanced at Duke many times, her eyes red and swollen. In the end, all the words she wanted to say turned into a deep bow. No one knew what decision this seemingly weak lady of the Barav family had made. Finally, Xueqi gave Lang and Anduin the arrangements for the Western Wilderness, as well as the contact information of the Nagas and the Murlocs. The Windrunner yearns for freedom. If I am not here, they will not serve Stormwind. Whatever happens, let them be, Xueqi said to Lang. No, Xueqi, you will not die. King Terenas promised me that his team of spies will definitely rescue Alexstrasza. Xueqi did not answer immediately, but asked, "What deal did you make with that old man Terenas? Do you think that if he can save my life, you will agree to let me go to Rotterdam?" Lang was not a good liar, and he admitted it as soon as Xueqi pressed him. "Sorry, I think this is the best for you." "Your Majesty." "Call me Lang," King Lang insisted. "All right, Lang, I will tell you in private. Even if I die, I will not go to Rotterdam. I don't know why, but I hate Terenas. I have no interest in serving Arthas." Xueqi shrugged. "It's that simple." Lang was speechless. Anduin was speechless. Duque clapped his hands. All right, if there is anyone in this world who can save Alexstrasza, it will not be Terina's. Because this is the domain of the dragons, and also the domain of mystery. Anduin suddenly thought of something. Then why Antonida's? Anduin shook his head at Lang again. Antonida's had to be responsible for the entire Dalajan. He would not risk his life for a foreign duke. At this time, Duque looked calm. But Sasha could not take it anymore. Duque, since the people from Rotterdam are not reliable, we should think of a way to get eldest sister and second sister back, and then we will go in by ourselves. We will go to Kudrin, he will definitely agree. What Sasha said was coincidentally Duque's current predicament. Previously, he had agreed to send Windrunner to help Rotterdam to eliminate the Warsong clan of Grom. In the end, the most reliable Aurelia, Sylvanas, and Lilith were seconded. Because they had to carry out a high-speed battle in the forest, Aurelia and the others did not bring the troublesome mages. In the end, they could not find Aurelia when they needed help at the crucial moment. They had just entered the Tirisful woodlands 2 days ago, and had promised to contact each other once a week. If they waited until they returned, they would probably only be able to collect Duque's corpse. Now, out of the 6 great rangers, only Sasha was left by Duque's side. Duque could not help but feel that the goddess of fate had ill intentions. It was not the first time that Duque recalled the process of the Red Dragon Queen's rescue. In the past, when he understood this epic story, he would always feel fascinated. He could not help but wonder what he would do if he were to participate in this grand history. Could he be like the main characters of this branch story, using all kinds of great powers to create such a miracle? But when he really had to participate in this plot, he felt a little hesitant. He suddenly smiled bitterly. So I still have not let go of life and death, moral integrity. Chapter 463. Once upon a time, Duque had forgotten the fear of death and the uneasiness brought about by the decay of his soul. Looking at the notification on his retina, Duque was still a little confused. Serious warning. Host, your Sargera's curse of resentment is active. You will lose your life force at the rate of 1 year per day. This effect has an unknown irreversible status. If you cannot lift the curse, you will die completely after 31 days and 22 hours, unable to be resurrected. Host, your soul power is also losing 10 points per day. It is estimated that it will be gone in 5 days. The soul power he had inherited from Mediv was 385, and his humanity was 230%. This was more than enough. But if he was dead and couldn't be resurrected, there was no point in having any moral integrity left. In the end, he still had to save the Red Dragon Queen as soon as possible. Faced with this situation, Duque was also in a state of panic. The Red Dragon Queen in the history was indeed saved, but that was after the Alliance had dealt with the main Horde forces and entered the mopping-up period. At that point in time, most of the Alliance's fallen areas had been recovered. Especially the dwarf fortress Grim Battle where Alexstrasza was imprisoned. Although the fortress was still under the control of the Dragonmaw clan, most of the wetlands had been recovered. In that terrible swamp, not only were there beast men, but there were also all kinds of human liberators. For example, the Silver Hand from Lordaeron, and the dwarves from Iron Furnace Castle. Of course, most of them were the Wormhammer Dwarf Griffin Knights from Eagle's Nest Mountain. And now, that place wasn't even the front line. It was definitely the enemy's rear. What did the enemy's rear mean? It meant that there was still the entire Earthy Highlands, where more than 200,000 beastmen were stationed. To go in and save the Red Dragon Queen would be more than 10 times more difficult. Duke had just caused the entire dragon riders to fall from the sky above the Alterac Palace. During the battle, he didn't see the chief of the Dragonmaw clan, Zulu hid. Needless to say, he must have run back to Grim Battle to urge the Red Dragon Queen to give birth soon. It was not appropriate to say that he wanted to have a son soon. In order to meet the needs of war, the beastmen needed a large number of wyverns as mounts. Unfortunately, while the Creation Titans bestowed the WYRMS with unparalleled powerful bodies, they also weakened their fertility. In fact, the number of true descendants of giant dragons was so few that it made one's hair stand on end. In history, the red dragons that were used as mounts by the beastmen during the later stages of the war were actually the unfertilized eggs of other female giant dragons. Well, it was similar to the monthly ovulation of human females. However, Alexstrasza was forced to use magic to catalyze these unfertilized eggs into fighting wyverns. Due to their congenital defects, these red dragons could never grow into young dragons that were more than 1,000 years old. For the tribe, this was not important at all. It didn't matter if it was a genetic defect or a magical creation, as long as it could be ridden, it could deal with griffins in the air, and it could cleanse the ground with dragon breath. That was enough. Now, if Xueqi asked Qudran to lead the Griffin Knights there, Qudran would definitely agree with his character. But Xueqi could not cheat him. The dwarves were the humans' good brothers, and if they were to be wiped out like this, Xueqi would feel bad. After Xueqi and Sasha analyzed the situation, not only Sasha, but even Lang and the others' eyes dimmed. To be honest, Xueqi felt a little helpless. It felt like the more he changed the course of the world, the more he was destined to go against the will of the world, or the amazing ability of the River of Fate to correct things. He had a bad feeling that he was doomed to fail. However, when Duke looked around and saw Ryan, who was still alive and kicking, the Windstalker's third sister Windstalker Sasha, who was wearing the emblem of the Stormwind Kingdom, and Gavin Rad and Alucia, who should have died tragically, were present, Duke could feel a faint sense of warmth. It was as if they were constantly reminding Xueqi that everything he did was worth it. Xueqi sighed. Tomorrow. If I don't hear from Aurelia and the others by tomorrow, I'll set off immediately. And please, even if you have to imprison Aurelia, don't let her catch up. I'm afraid she'll do something stupid. No, Xueqi, you don't understand, big sis. She'll definitely catch up. Then tell her that I have a 60% chance of coming back alive, Xueqi said decisively. 60%? That high? It wasn't just Sasha. Almost everyone present was stunned. From how they saw it, no matter who Xueqi brought with him this time, they would definitely die if they went deep into the enemy's territory. Who knew that Xueqi would say that he had a 60% chance? I know that this is a huge crisis for both me and the Alliance. But I can still use my magic. Through a history book I read in Karazhan, I know what imprisoned Alexstrasza. The most important thing is that I know how to solve this matter. This is something none of you have. The only problem is that I need to leave the Alliance's command for a long time. Anduin patted his chest and promised, "That's easy. Leave the military matters to me. I'll try my best to put pressure on the Horde and attract their attention." Lang continued, "I'll give you all the manpower that MI7 can deploy." Xueqi shook his head. "I don't need bandits." Almost as soon as he said that, the light in Vanessa's eyes dimmed. Xueqi smiled. "I promised your father that I'd take good care of you. If your father returns with success only to find that his daughter died because of an even riskier mission, I won't be able to rest easy even if I die." Vanessa didn't say anything. Xueqi continued, "This time, I've thought about it. I only need a few people to follow me." Anduin nervously took out a small notebook and prepared to record. "The ones going with me are Gavin Rad and Windsor." Gavin Rad's eyes lit up when he heard that, and his face was filled with determination. Windsor. Windsor, who had been entrusted with an important task for the first time, looked more eager. It wasn't her first time fighting, but it was the first time that she had to leave her two sisters to carry out such an important mission. The third name that Xueqi said made everyone confused. "I also want to find a young earth mage in the Dalajan called Ronan. I think he'll bring me luck." If Xueqi hadn't lost his ability to cast spells, Xueqi himself would be strong enough. Why would he choose an earth mage as his follower? Alright. The mysterious Xueqi was as puzzling as ever. Chapter 464. The Rapid Stream Castle had almost fallen. Only one city was needed for the Horde's flag to be placed on top of the Rapid Stream Castle's palace. But the 2 or 3 seemingly narrow city districts in front of the palace had become a meat grinder for both the Alliance and the Horde. There was no such thing as a front, and the humans were playing hide and seek. They could pop their heads out of the rubble of any ruins, or even shoot an arrow straight at the orc's head without popping their heads out. It was not until the Horde broke through the outer walls of the Rapid Stream Castle and entered the city district that they were shocked to find that the entire mountain under the ancient capital of Thoradin the Great was almost hollowed out. Under the walls of the Rapid Stream Castle, there were tunnels that looked like spider webs. Many of the tunnel entrances were quite narrow, which the burly orcs could not enter at all. As a result, whenever the orcs attempted to storm the inner city, the road from the outer city to the inner city would be constantly harassed and attacked. The orcs could not transport any heavy siege weapons. Perhaps a bag of kerosene would be thrown out of nowhere and burn the catapults and siege vehicles to ashes. On the 5th day after Orgrim evacuated from Lordaeron, Rend Blackhand, who was in charge of attacking the Rapid Stream Castle, received an order. This order from the Great Chief made Rend Blackhand very unhappy, but he had to carry it out. Since it is an order from Zulud, let Zulud take care of things here. He received a reply. An hour later, the Rapid Stream Castle welcomed its destruction. The wind pressure generated by the flapping of the red dragon's wings caused further damage to the ancient capital that had been half destroyed for more than 2,000 years. The terrible storm caused by the flapping of the dragon's wings easily blew down all the buildings that were still relatively intact. The slightly older buildings were directly uprooted, and the loose walls made of mud bricks were blown into the air and disintegrated. In front of the palace, the defensive zone that had troubled the orc army for months was like a sand castle that had been washed away by the waves. It was flattened in a few short breaths. "Forgive me." The dragon's deep voice of repentance came from the sky in the common language. Along with this voice, Tirani's abdomen bulged, then its chest, and finally its neck. Dense golden flame patterns formed by the draconic language appeared in the air in front of the giant dragon. For a moment, this light even surpassed the light of the sun. A destructive flame quickly expanded from that small cluster into a huge fireball that was even bigger than the entire house. The golden light completely shrouded the entire royal palace of Torrent Fort. The grayish-black palace was doused with lava-like flames. In the screams of every Riptide Castle resident who witnessed this scene, the palace melted. The huge bluestone was like a piece of cheese that was melted by the high temperature. It began to flatten, and a blazing unknown substance spread in all directions. The symbol of Riptide Castle was gone? The ancient capital of the Arajuo Empire, which had been passed down for over 2,000 years, was gone just like that. Talanistas looked a little weak, but the orc on his back roared loudly. The pitiful ancient dragon had no choice but to pull himself together. He aimed at a huge cave and spat out what was left of his dragon breath. It was as if a terrible volcano had erupted in the underground pit. The narrow tunnels that restricted the orcs from entering became the graves of the humans. The doors and boulders that restricted the entry of enemies collapsed like dominoes. Not only Tyrannies, but the other red dragons also followed the orcs' orders and quickly found a deep pit, spitting their dragon breaths into it. This situation was a bit like a syringe. With enough pressure from one side, the flames spread along the tunnel to all the space in the mountain. King Salas Trollbane, who had just arrived at the wall of Saladin, fell to his knees. It wasn't just him. Every Stromgarde warrior saw the golden flames shooting out from the ventilation holes on the cliff of the mountain where Riptide Castle stood. How many of the people inside could survive? Was it a slim chance of survival? Or was it 1 in 100? No! Tears of despair rolled down the determined faces of these mountain men. They watched their motherland, the Stromgarde kingdom, sink into darkness and burn in flames. Their loved ones and compatriots cried and struggled in pain. For a moment, almost everyone in Riptide Castle felt that everything was destroyed, whether it was hope or the road ahead. Riptide Castle was destroyed. This was the second capital to be destroyed since the establishment of the Alliance. It was also the third capital of the 7 human kingdoms to fall. This news spread throughout the entire Alliance within a day. The people of almost every surviving country trembled in fear. Among the remaining countries, only the Dalajan and Silvery Moon had the strongest magical defense. Perhaps they could withstand the destructive attacks of the giant dragons. But the rest were in doubt. Not to mention small countries like Kurtiras and Gilnis. Even Lordaeron couldn't guarantee that they would be able to withstand it. For a moment, the urgency to save the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza reached an unprecedented peak. Every big shot of the Alliance was waiting for the results of Lordaeron's special forces. The results made all the big shots of the Alliance fearful. 48 human corpses were impaled by huge wooden stakes on the empty space outside the wall of Saladin. Looking at these human corpses wearing epic leather armor, most of the guards on the wall were at a loss. Only King Tarina's Menethil was so angry that he plucked out a few tufts of his beard. Lordaeron's surprise attack had failed. It was a complete and utter failure. The high-level bandits that Tarina's had sent were all killed. Not a single one managed to come back to report back to him. This was the most severe slap to Lordaeron's face. For a moment, Duque's act of saving himself and the Red Dragon Queen had attracted the attention of all the big shots of the Alliance. An uneasy feeling enveloped the Kirin Tor Council of 6. In the conference hall in the air, there were no walls. Large amounts of light and dark clouds surrounded these high-level mages, flowing and changing constantly. Looking up, it seemed that even time had become faster. Only the dark gray marble floor, which was inlaid with diamond-shaped runes that symbolized the four major elements, gave this scene some semblance of reality. At this moment, the fiercest debate broke out in the conference hall. These usually elegant and scholarly counselors were now even more rowdy than antis in a wet market. I have no objections to supporting Duke Marcus. I have to admit that he's a great guy who can create miracles. But why did he name Ronan? Chapter 465. Ronan? A counselor shouted. Ronan! Hasn't he killed enough of his own people? 5 outstanding young Morningstar magicians died to his dangerous magic. He doesn't even have the right to wear a magician's robe anymore. He only brings danger, not hope. Even a goblin's bomb is more reliable than him. Another counselor agreed. Everyone knew that a goblin's bomb could explode at any time, even if it was disguised as a handsome man lying in an ice cave. If it was someone from before he transmigrated, it would be the new era should I die happy 7. Although I believe that His Excellency Marcus can suppress this maverick, aren't you afraid that he will kill His Excellency Marcus ahead of time by putting him together with our alliance star? A slightly chubby member of parliament muttered. Yes. We can't trust him. We can't let that criminal go. The first counselor echoed. From start to finish, only 2 people were silent, quietly watching the 4 counselors argue. Soon, they realized that the chairman and the 6th person were silent. Suddenly, the lively atmosphere began to cool down. Are you done arguing? Antonidas said leisurely. There are only 2 choices in front of us. The first is to gather all the strongest magicians in the Dalagan and Kuel Salis and kill Terranista. But I have to remind you that there is more than one ancient dragon in the Red Dragon army. Many of them are not controlled by the orcs and are hiding. Also, what role has the Red Dragon army played in the Tirisfal Parliament for the past 1,000 years? The 4 counselors did not speak. The counselors of the Tirisfal Parliament were all from the Silver Moon Parliament and the Kirin Tor Parliament. In the past 1,000 years, the Tirisfal Parliament and its guardians had maintained a very good relationship with the red, blue, green, and bronze dragon races in terms of protecting the world. In a sense, the Red Dragon army was actually one of them. The second is to let Duke Marcus, who originally wanted to find Alexstrasza to save his life, carry out this perfect plan that can solve all problems in one go. I understand your concern for Sir Marcus, but, since he doesn't care about Ronan, why should we worry? Besides, I remember that we all owe Duque a favor. When Antonidas said this, the counselors all laughed dryly. That's right, these guys all had a share of the dragon skin and whatnot as casting materials. Of course, a certain counselor named Crasus didn't look too happy when he accepted the bribe. Crasus spoke. Although Sir Marcus's name is a bit wrong, Ronan is not an earth wizard, but a morning star. However, this small detail isn't important. What's important is whether we can come up with a better remedy to increase the success rate of this operation. Antonidas suddenly laughed and said, Didn't our deputy commander of the Alliance always suggest that in the battle against the Horde, apart from glory, we should also give material rewards to the real heroes who killed the enemy? Crasus immediately understood. The one who killed the most enemies in our alliance doesn't even have a staff. The old but experienced chairman chuckled. I can contribute an epic staff blueprint suitable for both Morningstar and Radiant Moon Magi. In fact, I even have a prototype that I can be proud of. Crasus continued, As for the cost, that's the alliance's problem. We might as well set the standard higher. For example, killing 1,000 orc warriors to obtain this staff. Good idea. The other 4 counselors agreed. And so, the Alliance's first epic weapon to reward heroes was born. When Duque received the staff the next day, Duque was still a little confused. He blurted out, Grand Marshal's battle staff. Crasus was taken aback. Duke had called out the staff's name in one go. After all, they had come up with the name last night in the Kirin Tor Council. They had originally wanted to call it a hero's staff. However, they felt that it didn't match up to Duque's status, so they simply called it the Marshal's staff. The warrior version was called the Marshal's two-handed warblade, which was forged by the dwarves of Steel Furnace Castle. After all, anyone who could kill 1,000 orc warriors was definitely not a nobody. Being promoted to a general or something was a sure thing. The counselors didn't feel that it was an offense to any country. After all, it meant that a soldier who didn't want to be a marshal wasn't a good soldier. Who knew that Xueqi would say it out loud? Xueqi also realized that he had let it slip. Fortunately, he had a chance to fix it. He pointed at the draconic words on the staff. This is what the draconic words mean. Does this staff have another name? Krasis became embarrassed. Compared to the elven magic that humans worshipped, Krasis instinctively felt that the magic of the ancient dragon race was more authentic and original. In order to make the staff look high-end, Krasis added a paragraph of draconic words before handing it over. He thought that no one would understand, but who knew that Xueqi would say it out loud? Krasis was surprised and pleasantly surprised. Sir Marcus, you know draconic words? A little. A little. In reality, Xueqi didn't know **T. The system only translated 2 words for him. The truth of the matter was that the unique design of the staff had evoked the memories of a veteran player. The entire staff was white in color. The head of the staff was a chess-like horse's head, and on both sides of the horse's head was a pair of raised wings. There was a mysterious arcane power lingering at the tip of the staff, causing 4 white mithril-shaped ornaments that looked like kite shields to revolve clockwise around the staff. Below it was a very Alliance-style ribbon, and then there was a brown handle and a translucent prismatic blue magic crystal at the end of the staff. Back in the day, before Xueqi traveled to this world, he had farmed countless days and nights on the battlefield to get this cool staff. Suddenly obtaining this magic staff, Xueqi actually had a kind of uncontrollable excitement. It was full of memories. My years. My youth. This reminds me of the days when I got the staff and ran towards the sunset in the wild, hunting down the horde. Kill. Or be killed. Honor kills, or be killed by honor kills. He still remembered the crazy days when a silly vice leader called Two Swords was killed by the horde at 3 in the morning while picking up girls in the game. Then, the guild mobilized 400 people to go online and fight the horde. He still remembered. Ahem. I digressed. Once people traveled to another world, it was easy to recall the past. At this time, Krasis asked, Sir, do you have any special information about the Red Dragon Queen being captured? Chapter 466. Krasis was actually a little nervous. As one of the male dragons who admired Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, his heart was broken when his queen was captured and the entire Red Dragon army was controlled and enslaved by the filthy beast men. As an ancient red dragon, Alexstrasza's influence on his mind was not as great as that of other low-level red dragons. The premise here was that he did not contact the queen telepathically. In fact, many ancient red dragons avoided being enslaved by the beast men by deliberately avoiding telepathic contact. But recently, even without direct contact, Krasis could feel that his beloved queen was inevitably weakening, both mentally and physically. This was a bad sign. Krasis was very anxious. He contacted Xueqi to see what Xueqi needed. Secondly, he wanted to see if this Xueqi, who was known as the strongest commander in the Alliance and had almost earned the title of Mastermind, had any special information or ideas. After all, he had lost contact with the Red Dragon army and could only guess a lot of things. I don't have any accurate information. Almost as soon as Xueqi finished speaking, Krasis' face was filled with disappointment that could hardly be concealed. I see. Duke looked at Krasis' seemingly calm but incomparably disappointed expression. He stopped teasing Krasis. But there's still a direction. Can you tell me? I once witnessed Her Majesty Alexstrasza's heroism in Karazhan. So, from the beginning, I did not think that ordinary creatures could control the incomparably powerful Her Majesty. Makes sense. Krasis nodded. So, I flipped through the ancient books of Karazhan and found this record about the dragons. This is a very long story. In the ancient war, the races of Azeroth, led by the Pentashade Guardian, united to resist the invasion of the Burning Legion. The Pentashade Guardian even created an extremely powerful divine artifact that killed all the millions of demons of the Burning Legion in one go. When Xueqi said this, Krasis could not help but breathe faster. As the Red Dragon Queen's youngest admirer, as a young dragon, he had not experienced that earth-shattering battle. However, this did not prevent him from learning about it from his elders. Speaking of the war, there was one thing that couldn't be avoided. It was something that shamed the entire dragon race, the dragon soul, or more precisely, the devil soul. I knew it was Devil's Soul, Krasis said through gritted teeth. Then he realized that he was too excited. Sorry, I was too excited. However, as an ally of the Red Dragon army for more than 1,000 years, it's a cruel thing for us to fight the Red Dragons. Xueqi smiled and pretended to understand. He continued, of course, this is just speculation. I wasn't sure. After all, I had to see the real thing to know. However, what I'm thinking is that if it's the demon's soul, I have to inform the other Dragon Kings to deal with this matter because I'm worried that this is a conspiracy by the Wing of Death, Nesario. The speaker had the intention, and the listener had the intention. Even if a certain Red Dragon still didn't know that the other party was a transmigrator who was even more of a fraud than a fraud, it still didn't prevent a certain dragon from having a good impression of fraud. Krasis became more and more certain that Xueqi had a very good chance of successfully saving Alexstrasza. Marcus, what are you going to do? Du shrugged. I'll just play it by ear. This answer made Krasis want to vomit blood. If it were someone else, Krasis would have definitely slapped them into the wall with Dragon Claw Swipe. However, the one in front of him was Xueqi, known as the most far-sighted and wisest sage and commander in the entire alliance. Moreover, because the real dragons had an almost infinite lifespan, he had more spare time than other great mages to study trivial matters, such as the rise of Xueqi. Krasis found that Xueqi had the temperament of a fraud. In particular, Xueqi's ability to see through appearances was even rarer. The conspiracy that the Burning Legion's shaman had painstakingly hidden for hundreds of years was actually seen through by a young man. If this wasn't talent, then what was it? Even though it was a bit irrational, Krasis's intuition told him that betting on Xueqi was the right choice. Krasis bowed deeply to Xueqi. Thank you for your frankness, sir. You didn't have to tell me at all. No. You're also half a master to Ronin. I'm just telling you not to worry. Ronin. Krasis felt a bit strange when Ronin was mentioned. Even though he had been secretly training Ronin so that he could master the technique of sneaking into grim battle, he still felt strange when Xueqi suddenly asked for him. He forgot that a fraud was a fraud. Sorry, actually, I dreamt of Ronin and Her Majesty Alexstrasza. I think this is a sign from the goddess of fate. I did some research and it turns out that there really is a mage named Ronin in the Dalajan, so well, that's it. If you don't think it's suitable, I can give up on summoning Mage Ronin. Krasis was dumbfounded, but he soon accepted it. A sign of fate. Such a high-end and mysterious power. When Krasis connected the fact that Xueqi had miraculously defeated Sargeras, he couldn't help but wonder if Xueqi was the so-called child of fate. Alright, it just so happens that Ronin committed a crime. Even though he's currently in detention and under investigation, he's probably willing to use this method to prove himself. Not to mention that he's working with the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. I just hope that he won't be so careless and drag you down with him. Don't worry. I'm very good at instant casting. Ice barrier. Krasis was speechless. The matter was settled. Half an hour later, in a room in a side tower of Violet Castle, a mage was waiting for his latest punishment. He looked about him with boredom. There was a brocade hanging on the thick stone wall in front of him. The violet area in the middle was embroidered with a complicated golden eye that seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. Below the eye were 3 golden daggers pointing to the ground. This flag of the Dalajan, this symbol, had always been raised high during the war, fulfilling their mission to protect the Alliance, even though not every Kirin Tor member fulfilled their mission with honor. He was a little anxious because the latest news was that he was actually connected to one of the Alliance's 2 heroes, Duke Marcus. He wasn't sure if this was a blessing. Chapter 467. Ronin raised his head and gazed into the distance with his deep green eyes under his thick red hair. There was a scar on his nose from a fellow apprentice, but no matter how skillful the culprit was, Ronin had never thought of fixing it. Even so, Ronin did not look ugly. He had a straight and elegant chin and a sharp face. His arched eyebrows made him look like he was full of sarcasm and suspicion. Most people were superficial. Before understanding the beauty of the other party's soul, they would often reject the other party from the bottom of their hearts because of the bad habits brought about by the appearance association. Ronin was treated the same way. His appearance had caused him trouble in communicating with the higher-ups more than once. Every time he tried to alleviate all of this, his ferocious expression and slightly exaggerated body language could only play a negative role in the situation. He wore an elegant midnight blue robe. His tall and handsome figure was very eye-catching, even to the mages. Ronan was silent. He had sacrificed 5 outstanding companions in the last mission. To him, who was waiting for an interrogation, any extra words would only make the accusations against him more severe. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at the door again, waiting for a mage to come in and speak to him. An interrogation, or a direct sentence from an important figure. The door, which seemed to be made of solid metal, disappeared without a sound. It was the same for a door made of magic. It was controlled by a magic program that normal mages could not understand. The Kirin Tor Parliament had used this cage system to imprison many criminals in the Violet Prison under the Dalajan. It had been like this for hundreds of years. The sudden light from the door made Ronan turn his head and close his eyes. But quickly, he opened his eyes and looked straight at the door. To his surprise, it was not the intimidating inquisitors and their assistants, nor was it Krasus, who was half his mentor. Instead, it was a young sorcerer with a tuft of silver hair. His hair did not look like it was dyed, but it did not match his young face. Ronan looked at the person who came. It was Xueqi. Xueqi was also sizing Ronan up. He saw a pair of deep green eyes that were as calm as a lake before a storm. There was no fear, no anger, and no hatred. He could clearly see the ugly scar on Ronan's nose, as well as the helplessness under that seemingly vicious expression. Not only that, it was hard to even find anger. This kind of incongruous feeling made it difficult for Xueqi to connect the person in front of him with the glorious Kirin Tor Archmage in history. This was the first time Xueqi had seen such an expression since he transmigrated. It was an expression that could only be seen after one had been abandoned by one's teacher, rebuked by one's peers, insulted by the world, and made enemies with the entire world. If it was an ordinary person, most of them would bend their back and lower their head in front of a high-ranking person, trying their best to show a humble and pitiful posture. But Ronan didn't. From the moment he opened the door until now, his posture had been as straight as a pine tree. He did not raise his chin, nor did he lower his gaze. He just calmly looked straight into Xueqi's eyes. That's right. Ronan was not afraid of death, nor was he afraid of being questioned. He was only waiting for the result of his trial. Was it eternal oblivion, or redemption? Hello, Ronan. My name is Duke Marcus. Nice to meet you. Duke Marcus. The 1.5-year battle at the Door of Darkness had made Xueqi's name known across the 2 continents. For the first time, Ronan was stunned. Why would such a famous person come to see him? My apologies. Please forgive my stupidity, my lord. I don't understand how a sinner like me can help you, my lord. Or should I say, aren't you afraid of bringing misfortune upon seeing someone like me? Xueqi laughed. If it really is the power of the goddess of misfortune, perhaps anyone who looks at it will meet with misfortune. Xueqi replied. But your degree of misfortune is nothing to me, who has suffered the curse of the Burning Legion Sargeras and only has a month left to live. If you can really bring misfortune, then I should be dying in front of you right now. Do you want to count down? 3, 2, 1. I'm dead. I don't think I'm dead yet. Looks like your misfortune is useless against me. Do you want to follow me for a while? Ronan was tongue-tied. He couldn't keep up with the thoughts of this person in front of him. He felt like he was losing his ability to think. When he had been imprisoned by the Kirin Tor Internal Affairs and dragged away like a bag of trash, he had thought that his terrible life as a wizard, or even this cursed life, was about to be liberated. But when the door opened, Ronan found out that what awaited him was not the result of execution or the destruction of all his magic circuits. He would be unable to use magic for the rest of his life. Instead, he was going to follow a person who only appeared in legends? Ronan was stunned. Xueqi scratched his head. Looks like my reputation isn't working. Then, for the sake of the Alliance, the humans, the dwarves, and the high elves, can you help me? This is a mission with a very high level of danger. When Xueqi said this, Ronan suddenly came to a realization. Ronan lowered his head for the first time and then quickly raised it again. There were a few more tears at the corner of his eyes. He shouted at the top of his lungs. I'm willing. I'm willing to do anything. I don't need to make any contributions. As long as I can wash away the sins on my body, so that I don't have to think about the faces of the victims' families every night, and make my heart feel better, I'm willing even if I have to die. Xueqi was stunned and then came to a realization. Azeroth's history still had its original momentum. But this was different from the original timeline. At the original timeline, Ronan had gone to save the Red Dragon Queen. That was after the war had ended and he had been imprisoned for a long time. At that time, Ronan had already calmed down, or perhaps his heart was dead. But now, after Ronan had committed a crime, he was in the most pain and his conscience was at its worst. It was as if he was in front of a cliff, unable to find his way out. Just as he was venting his pain, Xueqi had extended a simple wooden bridge to him from the other side of the cliff. Even though it looked unstable and had all sorts of questions, there was no doubt that this was Ronan's only salvation. Xueqi lowered his head and sighed. "Ronan, if you follow me from now on, let me tell you why your magic always goes out of control." Chapter 468. What did it feel like to guide someone who was only half a step away from becoming a mage god? It felt good. It felt really good. It was like traveling to the past and teaching Edison how to invent and think about life. It was like teaching him to apply for a patent for his invention. If Ronan was a girl, it would be as bad as teaching a little girl who believed in Santa Claus to go to Mount Akina to watch an old driver drive. Fortunately, Ronan was male. Just like that, Xueqi's rescue team was formed, carrying the will and hope of the entire alliance. This was not an exaggeration at all. Tyranni's frontal attack put a lot of pressure on the alliance. They wanted to gather their army and counterattack in one go, taking back the earthy highlands first. In the end, more than 200,000 troops were blocked by an ancient dragon at the wall of Thoradin, unable to advance. If not for the Griffin Knights of the Wildhammer dwarves showing enough ferocity to fight, Tyrannis might have charged straight into the army camp behind the wall of Thoradin and washed it with dragon breath. The ruler of the skies was just that domineering. Xueqi, Gavin Rad, Sasha, Ronan, and Marion Firewing, who was forced into the team. This team of 5 seemed to be very low-key, but it had gathered quite a lot of big names. A deputy commander of the Alliance, a first-generation paladin, a ranger general, a future great mage, and a silver moon counselor. "Why did you come?" Xueqi asked Marion, the beautiful female high elf mage. "For the future of the Alliance. Duke is such a young and promising member of the Alliance. If he were to die under some terrible curse, it would be such a pity. This would also damage the relationship between Quel Salis and the Alliance. The Sun King and the Alliance agreed that only you are the best bridge between us and the Alliance." At this point, Marion rolled her eyes and continued. "Besides, isn't saving the beautiful queen from the hands of the evil and filthy orcs the standard template of a legendary story that can be sung and moved to tears? Is it wrong for me to want to be a part of the legendary story?" Marion spoke confidently and righteously. "But you don't have to sacrifice a silver moon counselor? Are we going to lose a deputy commander?" She was so reasonable that Xueqi couldn't find any room to refute. "We're going deep into the enemy's rear. No one will serve you." Xueqi, who had long heard of the debauched lifestyle of the High Elven mages, especially the Silver Moon Counselor, wanted to give them a heads up. "I volunteered to join. Even if I die in the wetlands, it's my own business. There are many people in Silver Moon City eyeing my position, waiting for me to die there. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. I won't let them get what they want." A certain Dew could only pinch his nose and accept it. Let's hope Marion won't be a burden. It wasn't that Xueqi didn't believe in Marion's strength, but he wasn't sure of her actions. Just like that, the 5-man team set off. Because the entire earthy highlands and the wetlands across the sea belonged to the front line, it would be a joke to fly directly to grim battle on a griffin. After the discussion of the Alliance's bigwigs and staff officers, they decided to fly to the Stormwind fleet on the other side of the Paladin Bay. Then when night fell, they would use a small boat to land on the west coast of the wetlands. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was harsh. Xueqi didn't expect that there could be conflicts between his own people and people from all over the world. Xueqi suddenly realized that wherever Marion was, Sasha would definitely sit next to him. It had been like this since they started riding griffins. Sasha insisted on riding with him no matter what, but in the end, Marion and Gavin Rad shared the same griffin. It was even more so on the boat. Yes, like a mother bird protecting her chicks, she spread her wings and stared at the enemy, unusually vigilant. "Sasha, we're all partners on missions together." "No, Xueqi, you don't understand. This kind of woman is a scourge that eats people up without spitting out the bones. I'm going to watch over you in place of my sister. Sasha said this in front of Marion, giving her a provocative look. Marion didn't care at all. This is Windrunner's misunderstanding of the Silver Moon Council. No, Duque. Marion is one of the 7 sisters of the Silver Moon Salon, a famous socialite. If I had known that she was also a member, I would have firmly opposed it. It seems like you have a deep prejudice against me. In the salon, we discussed high art, including poetry and music. Liar. Keep lying. Moreover, Sir Marcus didn't even set a marriage with your sister. Even if I wanted to pursue him, I would do it openly. With that, Marion giggled and puffed out her chest. It was a very sexy mage robe with a heart hollowed out at the chest. Just like that, it immediately revealed how shocking the deep ravine was. Moreover, so what if we have a marriage? We high elves don't pay attention to so-called etiquette. Polygamy, or polygamy, is also a very common thing. It's just that there can only be one who inherits the position and reputation of the elder. So, even if it's you, Sasha, you can still steal your sister's man. You're shameless. Sasha was furious. Especially when Sasha turned her head and saw that Ronan's eyes were a little straight. She only retracted her gaze with a red face when she saw it. Gavin Rad. This noble wastrel holy knight didn't hide his admiration for Marion at all, in the form of whistling. Originally, for a moment, Sasha had lost all hope in Duque's willpower. However, the 2 ladies were stunned. Duque was very calm. He looked at Marion's pair of peaks, calm and serene, without excitement or embarrassment. It was as if he was admiring a passable work of art. Duque, why did you? Sasha was stunned. Duque blinked. This is a very common attire. That's right. This level of exposure can make a veteran of 10 terabytes of romantic action movies like me get excited and have a nosebleed? You're looking down on me too much. Even elementary school animals wouldn't freeze at this level. Yes, the righteousness on the face is to hide the filth in the heart. That's right. That's it. It just so happened that Mediv still had a lot of moral integrity left, and Duke now looked like a saint. Sasha was a little surprised. To avoid alarming the tribe, the ship chose to dock at night. A speedboat sent the group of 5 to the shore in the night, probably near the future Menethil port. Then, a group of sailors sent them and their horses ashore. After getting off the ship and stepping onto the shore of Cosmodon, the group entered an environment where beast men walked everywhere and dragons flew in the sky. So they bickered a little on the ship, but once they got off, everyone quietened down. Chapter 469. On the battlefield, the situation was extremely heated. After suppressing the alliance at the Saladin Wall, the Horde desperately needed a diversion to vent their anger. Of course, Orgrim found one. Of course it was Gul'dan's betrayal. Orgrim immediately mobilized the 2 brothers, Rend Blackhand and Maim Blackhand, and led 50,000 men to chase after Gul'dan's Twilight Hammer and Storm Predator clans. Apart from that, there were also many Dragon Knights. The chairman was right. To defend against foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Orgrim did this in a comical manner. He wanted to quickly deal with Gul'dan, and then endure until winter. When more orcs came from the Dark Portal, he would regroup next spring and attack Lordaeron again. After all, with the Earthy Highlands as a bridgehead, there would be no need to fight those disgusting naval battles and land battles. If all else failed, they would open a road to the hinterlands through the high-altitude mountains between the Earthy Highlands and the hinterlands. It all depended on how the alliance defended the long front. Unfortunately, his opponent was Duque. Duke's goal was to kill as much as possible of the tribe's strength. Even when he was not here, there were still legends about him. Dooku was no longer around, but his plans still had epic-making guidance. That's right. Orgrim's last 10,000 men did indeed cross the Alterac Mountains day and night to avoid the Alliance's pursuit. They crossed the entire hinterlands and returned to the Sea-Viewing Cliff. At the Sea-Viewing Cliff, Gul'dan did indeed destroy many ships, but there were still many left. After 3 days of hard labor, Orgrim finally managed to gather enough ships for 13,000 orcs and 1,000 trolls to cross the sea. Since he sent out the Blackhand brothers, Orgrim naturally wanted to return to the wetlands. After reorganizing the clans, he would regroup and stabilize the front line of the Earthy Highlands. Orgrim gritted his teeth and swore that he would learn from the humans and build a bunker. That's right. He would build a fortress on the east side of the Saladin Wall that the humans would have to sacrifice 100,000 lives to take down. Unfortunately, his grand plan was not realized before he suffered a heavy blow. Thinking about it, Xueqi knew that Orgrim could only return to the southern continent from the hinterlands, so how could he not have a backup plan? Moreover, it seemed like the heavens were not interested in protecting these foreign butchers of the horde. Just half an hour after Orgrim's fleet set sail, they ran into a storm. In this day and age, any sailor with a modicum of experience would act according to the weather. Unfortunately, Orgrim's subordinates were all muscular men who relied on brute force to conquer the sea. They acted recklessly, and then they were punished. The gale raised a terrifying triangular wave that was at least 10 meters tall, easily capsizing all the small newly built transport ships. Only the transport ships that were built earlier and in better condition barely survived the storm. However, after the storm subsided, Orgrim was ambushed by the Nagas and the Murlocs before he could even calculate his losses. Ha ha ha! In the name of our master, Duke Marcus, kill all those green-skinned creatures. Vara, the furious scale Naga priest, laughed heartily. Galuu, kill all the orcs. Murloc prophet Morgur yelled. Countless Murlocs rushed to the surface of the sea from the depth of 10 meters. The storm had little effect on the bottom of the sea. Basically, one could not feel the wind and waves 10 meters below the surface of the sea. Just now, the merfolk were simply picking up the human heads, drowning those who had drowned or those who had been thrown to the surface of the sea. Then, they cut off the heads and returned to the place designated by Duke to present the heads as a tribute. Now, countless Murlocs rushed to the surface of the water with crude weapons and climbed onto the low orc transport ships. They bullied the orcs who had been fighting against the storm for several hours and had exhausted their strength. They shook the not-too-wide orc transport ships, causing the orcs to lose their balance. On the shaking ships, the heavy weapons that the orcs were so proud of became a burden. One after another, the transport ships were captured by the Murlocs. No! Orgrim screamed at the top of his lungs. However, he could only watch the scene unfold from the flagship. There was nothing he could do. The great chief never thought that the last elites of the Blackrock clan would be buried here. After all, this was the last group of Blackrock orcs who had fought against the Draenei. They had rich experience and the strongest physique. They were the elites of the elites. They defeated the Draenei who played with the Holy Light. They were the vanguard of the expedition to Azeroth. They had killed more than 100,000 humans in the Elven Forest, killed the Long-Ear High Elves, destroyed Alterac, fought under Lordaeron, and attacked the north camp of the Alliance. They had never surrendered to any enemy, but because they were not good at swimming, they were going to die here? Great Chief, let's go! Torghese of the Dragonmaw clan rode his dragon and swooped down at high speed. He let the dragon hover in the air. The dragon turned its snake-like neck and let out a threatening roar at the Murlocs in the distance. Unfortunately, there was only one dragon, and it had followed to cover the great chief. A normal red dragon did not have the stamina to stay in the air for so long. Only a dragon over 1,000 years old could cast an anti-gravity spell on itself, allowing its huge body to hover in the air effortlessly. Great Chief, let's go! The damned Murlocs are already digging at the bottom of the ship, Orgrim's personal guard captain, Hamark, said. Dragons were the rulers of the sky, but not the king of the sea. No matter how strong the dragon's breath was, it could not evaporate the entire endless sea. As for the Murlocs digging at the bottom of the ship under Maugur's command, the dragon could not do anything. No, I can't abandon you. Orgrim's eyes turned red as he looked at his brothers who had accompanied him for more than 10 years. No, you must abandon us, for the sake of the tribe. The orc warriors stared at Orgrim as if they weren't looking at their great chieftain, but at the last flickering flame of hope in the wasteland of despair and destruction. For the tribe. This sentence deeply pierced Orgrim's heart. It was not that these brothers of the Blackrock tribe did not know how terrible the situation was, nor did they not know who caused their world to wither and die, but they still silently raised their weapons and continued to fight. They did this for only one reason. For the tribe. Yes, they were wrong. They trusted the wrong Gul'dan. They also started a wrong war. But for the continuation of the tribe, they could only make mistakes again and again. But no one regretted it, because of the same reason, for the tribe. Chapter 470. Orgrim was agitated. Orgrim, who had returned to the wetlands alone, was almost in a frenzy. He mobilized all the resources at his disposal and launched an irrational attack on the Alliance. In Danmoro, Orgrim mobilized 100,000 beastmen laborers, ignoring the harassment of the dwarven assault team and forcefully breaking open the mountain. If the Iron Forge relied on the entire mountain, then the tribe would use brute force to destroy the entire mountain. In the wetlands, Orgrim stayed in the grim battle fortress for 3 days. The news that came out was that the furious chief had the beastman warlock Necros inflict the cruelest soul torture on the Red Dragon Queen. In the end, Orgrim managed to squeeze out a few Red Dragon fighters who were in hiding. Karantaz, Gahiren, Christasa, Hilstrasa, 2 males and 2 females. Unable to endure the faint waves of pain that their queen transmitted through her soul, the 4 dragons jumped out on their own and landed in the tribe's bowl. As a result, the tribe now had 5 ancient dragons, or at least close to the ancient level. These 5 giant dragons harassed the Alliance's defense line day and night. The entire Alliance was in a heated argument over whether or not to kill these red dragons who had become enemies. Did the Alliance have no backup plan? Definitely not. In a throne meeting at the command center near South Shore, King Salas of Stromgard, whose country had officially been destroyed, was furious. Bang! 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 He slammed the table. Those damned red dragons have fallen into the abyss of evil. I don't want to hear anything about being kind. The truth is that these giant lizards went crazy for their queen. They burned down our home and our capital. 5 dragons. They are enough to destroy every city on this road except for Dalajan and Silvery Moon. Every one of them understood Salas's rage. King Lang and General Haas, whose country had also fallen and their capital destroyed, resonated deeply. King Zeon Greyman of Gilneas was the most shocked. Among the remaining Alliance capitals, his home was the weakest and closest. What are we waiting for? If we gather all the advanced mages from the Dalajan and Kuel Salas, we won't have any problem killing these dragons. Antonidas and Prince Kael'thas, who was attending the meeting as a representative, had the darkest faces. In the end, it was Antonidas who spoke. If they are willing to land and fight us, we can still kill these 5 red dragons. There are 2 problems. First, will they obediently land on the ground and bombard us? Everyone's expression turned ugly. Secondly, before you make this decision, please take a look at the list of dragons we have collected about the Red Dragon Legion. I must remind you that this list is not complete. There were 40 to 50 red dragon names displayed on the projection screen. Half of them were male and half were female. At the end of the name, the age of the dragon was also roughly stated. Dragons were divided into 12 levels according to their age, starting from the weakest hatchlings to the archaic dragons like Alexstrasza, also known as the strongest guardian dragons of the primordial dragons. Basically, for pure-blooded dragons, age was a symbol of strength. Looking at such a large group of dragon brothers, sisters and sisters, from the very old to the primordial dragons, even the most arrogant king would lose his temper. Then what do we do? Wait for death one by one? The old Zeon spread his hands in despair. If Duque can save the Red Dragon Queen. Anduin Lothar whispered. Kudrin Wildhammer shouted, Isn't it just a fortress? Find a cloudy night with no moonlight. I'll gather all the Wildhammer dwarves and mount a griffin for a surprise attack. Krasis, who was beside Antonidas, finally couldn't help but speak. Please, do you think that Queen Alexstrasza, who participated in the Primordial War and killed tens of thousands of demons, is tied up in a fortress by a thumb-thick chain, waiting for you to rescue her? Then what's going on? Dwarves had always been the negative example of the word patient. Kudrin had a look of, I'll give you 10 seconds to solve the riddle, and if you don't tell me the answer, I'll flip the table. Krasis added, Sir Marcus isn't very sure himself, but he has a direction. Krasis didn't dare to say the word demon soul, because he had a bad feeling, as if someone was manipulating Alexstrasza's fall. What the hell in the end, we still have to trust that brat Duque. King Zeon muttered. King Terenas narrowed his eyes. Our vice commander has always done a good job. Why can't we trust a hero who has proven himself to the world? During this period of time, the cleanup of the horde in the Tirisful Glades was quite effective. There were already 15,000 orcs who had their heads chopped off. Tashan's orc head at the north gate of Lordaeron was not a lie. Humph. Zeon snorted, tacitly agreeing. The big shots of the Alliance still felt quite helpless. They didn't expect that in the end, they could only rely on Xueqi. How ironic. Hundreds of thousands of troops couldn't advance, and they could only wait for a young man who might die to save himself, the whole Alliance, and the whole world. Duke wasn't too clear about what was going on in the outside world. He could only understand what was going on in the outside world through magic communication when he stopped to set up camp. Xueqi didn't dare to send too many messages. He was afraid that he would be detected. Some dragons were quite sensitive to magic fluctuations. He wasn't sure how many dragons in the Red Dragon Army were actually working for the orcs, or were just doing their jobs. Xueqi didn't dare to take the risk. 4 days had passed. In this wetland full of swamps, the biggest threat was nothing more than annoying mosquitoes. Don't think that rolling around on the grass on a summer night is very romantic. When the mosquitoes swarmed you within a few minutes and stung all your exposed skin, you wouldn't be able to cry even if you wanted to. Of course, as a college student with some common sense, he prepared garlic and sulfur in advance. Garlic repelled mosquitoes, and sulfur repelled snakes and bugs. While Windsor was a ranger, she loved nature. Mosquitoes were a woman's natural enemy. At first, only Xueqi and Marion used their tents. Later, in order to save sulfur, Marion and Xueqi's tents were next to each other. Windsor, on the other hand, squeezed into Xueqi's tent. Don't think that anything could happen. With so many third wheels around, you could turn around and everyone would know. If you didn't look at the terrible swamp nearby, the constantly changing scenery made the journey quite poetic. Thanks to the swamp that could swallow people whole, the orcs weren't as vigilant as expected. Chapter 471. Ronan, I actually think that your teacher is a bit lousy. While resting, Duke was hiding under the shade of a tree as he complained. No, teacher treats me very well. Being abandoned by his teacher was a pain in Ronan's heart. He could not describe the feeling of being abandoned by the entire world. He answered Xueqi's question with an argument that even he could not convince himself. No, I mean, didn't he see the structure of your magic circuit? He actually gave you such a trashy magic circuit model? It's a miracle that you were able to reach the Morning Star realm. Ronan was shocked. Luoning was shocked. He had only cast spells twice and revealed the magic circuits on his arm. The magic circuit that could be seen on the skin was only the tip of the iceberg of the magic circuit in a wizard's body. It was only about 1%. How could Xueqi say that it was a miracle that he was able to reach the Morning Star realm? Ronan did not believe Xueqi alone, but before Xueqi, Krasis, who was like half a teacher to him, had told him so. Ronan was conflicted. If Ronan was said to be hesitant at first, then Xueqi's next words shocked him. Did you realize that while others could operate the arcane magic circuit in the same way without any problems, when you used it yourself, the arcane energy would rush out like a wild horse?
Yes.
Ronan, who was sitting on the ground, lowered his head, almost burying it between his knees. His appearance made Xueqi feel awkward. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a dog that had lost its owner. To be honest, Marion, who had not paid much attention to Ronan, did not understand why Xueqi would care so much about a wizard with such poor skills and no future. In Marion's eyes, even a high elf apprentice would be better than Ronan. Ronan's chaotic arcane aura was not surging, but it was always in a state of activation. It reminded Marion of those idiots who had absorbed too much energy from the sun well and self-destructed. Marion was waiting to watch a good show. Xueqi's decision, however, was unexpected. Do you want to try my magic circuit model? It came from Antonidas, but I modified him a little. Luoning was stunned. Marion was stunned as well. The magic circuit model was one of the mage's greatest secrets. The strength of a mage was directly related to his magic circuit. Xueqi actually gave it away just like that? Xueqi softly chanted an incantation and transferred a series of runes and circuit models into Luoning's mind in the most direct way. Almost at the same time, Ronan let out a fanatical cry of surprise. The more complicated a magic circuit was, the better it would be. Of course, the simpler it was, the more useful it would be. The most important thing was that it had to be suitable for him. A person with heart disease would not be able to ride the fiercest horse. Similarly, a person with insufficient aptitude should obediently ride the slowest horse, or even a donkey. Ronan's mouth was wide open. It was the arcane throne. Ronan wasn't strong, but he didn't lack insight. He almost instantly recognized that this model was definitely from Antonida's. He lightly simulated it in his mind and immediately confirmed that it was the arcane throne of Antonida's, the chief archmage. But it was also different. Antonida's was most famous for his ice magic, so his arcane throne was the foundation of Icecrown. The arcane throne that Ronan obtained, however, abandoned all external output and completely used arcane magic to serve arcane magic. Luo Ning was inexplicably shocked and cried out, "Duque, how did you know that I'm most proficient in arcane magic?" Duque smiled. "I could tell at a glance." Well, from Snowstorm Daddy's description of you, he could tell at a glance. This gift is too precious. Duque, however, shook his head. "First of all, this isn't the complete arcane throne. This is just a model to inspire you and provide you with reference. I'm just giving you some pointers so that you can see your own path clearly. Your previous model was too lousy and couldn't make use of your characteristics at all. Those guys also overemphasized the skills of controlling magic, which is a waste of your talent." "Talent?" "Yes. The magic output of your arcane circuit is at least 50 times that of a mage of the same level, so when you cast spells, you only feel that your magic power suddenly rushes out, and all the skills you learned are useless. The result is loss of control and explosion. For example, your arcane impact with one layer is like someone else stacking 10 layers, and the effect becomes arcane explosion." Luo Ning raised his head and stared at Duque in shock. He was completely stunned. Duque pointed out the crux of his problem, leaving no room for him to refute. "Then I need to," Duque said earnestly. "First of all, you need to get used to your magic power output. Just use it as powerful as possible. If you can use Arcane Missile Storm, don't use Arcane Missile. If you can use Arcane Explosion, don't use Impact. Then you can slowly adjust your magic circuit and find the balance between power and control." "Then is there any way?" "No, you have to find your characteristics first. You have to know who you are. Only by understanding your abilities and talents in all aspects can you start to find the direction of your development. That is the path that belongs to you. All the magic training in the Dalajan is actually just a method. However, that method is for ordinary magic apprentices and mages. It's not for you who is too talented." "I understand." Luo Ning stood up and bowed deeply to Duque. "You always failed because you used the wrong method. The method varies from person to person. Only by following the path that belongs to you can you find the method that suits you. But the method that suits you doesn't necessarily mean that you will reach the end of the magic path. After all, everyone's destination is completely different." Duque raised his hand lightly. In an instant, 9 magic energy balls appeared above Duque's head. Arcane, ice and fire. 3 different types of power merged harmoniously in Luo Ning's hand, turning into 3 Frostfire arcane energy balls. Everyone could feel the shocking destructive power contained in these small balls. However, no one could feel the power spreading from a distance. Under Luo Ning and Marion's gazes, Duque stopped the fusion and cycle of magic, slowing down the entire cycle. The terrifying power dissipated silently, and the surrounding magic waves quickly calmed down. After 3 breaths, not a single trace of magic could be seen in the air. "After you recognize yourself, I can discuss the way of control with you." Chapter 472. Sasha was about to go crazy. On one hand, she couldn't contact her 2 sisters. If Aurelia and Servanas received the message, they would definitely rush over as soon as possible. However, the message she and her rangers sent to Tirisful Forest was like a stone sinking into the ocean. She wasn't worried about her 2 sisters' safety. In her heart, as long as they entered the forest, they would be the strongest. It was obvious that they were being held back by a target. If she guessed correctly, it had to be Grom Hellscream. Her 2 sisters were still brooding over the fact that they couldn't take down that fierce orc even after working together in the first battle of Southshore. Their stubbornness caused Duque to lack powerful supporters. On the other hand, if Duque and the other 3 guards remained silent from start to finish, Sasha wouldn't feel troubled. If they focused their thoughts on the dangerous mission that they were about to face, Sasha wouldn't feel troubled. The problem was that Duque's journey was too leisurely. If one ignored the fact that this was enemy territory, there would be at least 7 or 8 waves of flying dragons flying overhead every day. This was like an outing. Ever since they'd come ashore, they'd only traveled a little more than 120 kilometers in 4 days. This was even slower than the normal marching speed of a human army. The swamp terrain was a little difficult to walk on. At least there were many paths that were obviously made by orcs. These paths led in all directions. As long as they headed east, they definitely wouldn't lose their way. However, Xueqi just rode on his horse, joking with Marion and Gavin Rad. He occasionally gave Ronan some pointers, but he refused to speed up. Everyone could see that Xueqi's hair was getting whiter by the day. The small tuft on his forehead turned white at the temples. Sasha also accidentally saw that the skin on the inside of Xueqi's left arm was starting to wrinkle like an old man's. Sasha finally couldn't take it anymore. She pulled Xueqi behind a small hill and said, "Xueqi, did you notice? Your hair is rapidly turning silver." "Isn't silver good? Silver is quite pretty. Look, don't you have silver hair too?" Xueqi seemed to be joking as he played with a strand of Sasha's silver hair. This was supposed to be a very intimate act. Normally, Sasha would have minded it, but she couldn't care less now. "Are you still joking? Xueqi, why aren't you nervous at all? Your life is counting down?" On Xueqi's face, there was an enigmatic calmness that Sasha could not imagine. "I don't know what you think of this war. I think that since I joined the Alliance's army, the moment I joined, every Alliance soldier should be mentally prepared to sacrifice themselves. Yes, I was afraid of it too, and I didn't want to die in agony after being tortured. But since I'm shouldering the future and fate of the 3 races with Noxus, I can't show timidity in front of my subordinates. But shouldn't we hurry to Grim Battle Fortress?" The beautiful silver-haired elf waved her tender arms agitatedly, using her body language to express her unease and dissatisfaction. "Or, do you know some important information that you don't think I have the right to know?" Sasha's subtext was, "Xueqi, do you think I'm not as good as my sisters?" Xueqi sighed. To be honest, Sasha was indeed not as good as her 2 sisters now. Aurelia and Servanas, who had become ranger generals a long time ago, had rich battle experience. They were great talents who could take charge on their own. Because the Silver Moon Council did not want the Windrunner family to have too many ranger generals, Sasha had always been a small ranger captain. Now, Sasha had the best talent, but she lacked experience. Right now, Sasha's abilities were far from what she had been when she had become the boss of the Silver Alliance. Sasha, who was taking charge of a mission for the first time, was a little impatient and had the patience to observe problems. Xueqi could not bear to disappoint her. "It's not about whether I have the right or not. It's just that I don't know how to break out of this situation." "Break out?" Xueqi seemed to sense something. He waved at Sasha and asked her to move her ear closer. Sasha hesitated for a moment, but she immediately did as he said. Even though she believed that even if Xueqi spoke softly, her sharp hearing would be able to catch Xueqi's words, Sasha had seen Xueqi whisper to her elder sister before. She was very curious and felt that it was a form of intimacy and acknowledgement. Yes, acknowledgement from a very great human commander. However, after moving closer and sticking her ear closer, Sasha regretted it a little. Xueqi's soft breath tickled her pointy ear. It was a strange and numb feeling that she had never felt before. The breath of an adult man caused her slender and beautiful neck to be dyed a crimson red. She tried hard to hold it in, and secretly activated her wind power to interfere with any possible eavesdroppers. Then, Xueqi's words were indeed very important. "Yes. The Red Dragon Queen's capture is part of a continuous plot related to the internal strife of the dragons. If I'm not wrong, the Red Dragon Queen was controlled by the artifact that was attached to her power and soul, the demon's soul, that was transformed from the dragon's soul. This matter was most likely the doing of the legendary Black Dragon King, Deathwing. I'll think of a way to attract Nesario's attention and make our team part of his plot." Sasha had always been curious and intelligent. She had read about the ancient war in ancient books. However, Xueqi actually wanted to dance on the claws of the scheming Black Dragon King, and then use the sinister and cunning Deathwing? That's too daring, isn't it? According to Sasha's calculations, unless Deathwing rushed to the Well of the Sun and courted death, even with all the power of Kuel Salus, they might not be able to kill this ancient Dragon King. Sasha's sexy red lips opened wide in surprise. She suddenly understood why Xueqi moved as if he was on a field trip. However, isn't this too obvious? Or is it not obvious enough to attract Deathwing's attention? What if Deathwing isn't monitoring this area? Sasha's mind was in a mess. How can I achieve the effect you want without leaving any traces? Just as Duque was about to say something, a loud noise came from the team. Under Duke and Sasha's astonished gazes, one or more beastmen's broken limbs flew into the air, and the cause of this effect was an incomparably huge ball of arcane energy. Sasha couldn't help but shout, "Ronin, you idiot!" Chapter 473. At first glance, it looked like a wizard casting an arcane explosion spell, the huge purplish-blue ball of light expanding at high speed. However, it was clear that it was actually a huge turbulent flow of arcane energy in the form of an arcane missile. After destroying the target it was supposed to attack, this huge ball of arcane energy suddenly flashed and crashed into another hill in the distance. Break! 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 The violent arcane energy turned into countless blue arrows of light, turning the entire hill into a sieve. Gravel flew everywhere, and the dust settled in the damp breeze unique to the wetlands. It was no wonder that Sasha was so agitated. The intense undulations of arcane energy told the red dragon in the sky that something big had happened. The dragons knew how much damage a Morningstar wizard could cause, and would not ignore it. In this era where illiterates were everywhere, some might know that human magic came from the High Elves, but very few knew that the dragons were the ancestors of magic. In ancient times, when the creation titans had arranged for the 5 dragons to become the dragon protectors of the world of Azeroth, they had arranged for the oldest blue dragon king, Malygos, to be the protector of magic. The other dragons had their own characteristics, but they were all very sensitive to magic. As Sasha cursed, she took out the longbow on her back with dazzling movements and nocked an arrow. The orc that had just been killed was obviously not worthy of Sasha's vigilance. The enemy came from the sky. Ronin, who had just finished pouring out his magic, had yet to recover from the violent but overly effective magic attack when he suddenly felt a shiver pass through his body. The feeling scared him so much that he almost jumped up from the ground. Something was approaching. He raised his head to look at the sky, only to see thick, gray, cotton clouds. "Idiot, hurry up and leave." Gavin Rad grabbed the collar of this troublemaker and dragged him onto his horse. Ronin's face was pale. He realized that he had messed up again. Just because of a few orc laborers lying in ambush in a mud hole beside the swamp, he had alarmed the god of death in the sky. Trying to keep his head up on the back of the jolting horse, he saw an invisible ripple in the eastern sky, spreading out in all directions with something at its center. It was a little like a drop of water falling on the surface of water, creating a circle of ripples, only more violent. The clouds were violently torn apart. What followed was a thunderous ripple that caused Luo Ning to open his eyes wide in shock. Immediately after, a terrifying roar came from the sky. Luo Ning's body involuntarily tensed up as a black shadow broke through the clouds and rapidly expanded in his vision. In just a few seconds, the ground nearby was shrouded by a huge shadow. A deafening roar erupted in the sky, tearing through the atmosphere like a hurricane. Ronin struggled to sit on the horse's back and turned his head to look at the sky. Unfortunately, this time, he saw a scene from hell. A giant dragon covered in flames filled the sky, grabbing Ronin's warhorse that was still struggling and neighing in its front claws. Ronin's meticulously prepared bags of supplies kept falling off the warhorse's back. This dark red giant swallowed the rest of the food on its claws and locked its gaze on the small and pitiful human below. On its shoulder sat a ferocious-looking green monster with long fangs and a battle-axe in its hand. It pointed at Ronin and let out an ear-piercing roar, as if giving an order to the giant dragon. The dragon roared and extended its claws, diving towards him. "Damn it! You jinx!" Gavin Rad cursed. He did not hide his hatred for Ronin at all. Even though Ronin was not facing the Holy Knight, he could still feel the Holy Knight's anger. It was no wonder that Gavin Rad was angry. Ronin was a troublemaker. If he did not provoke him, he would be a young dragon that was over 1,000 years old. According to the reports, this was the strongest red dragon in the entire wetlands. All the older dragons with independent names had gone to attack the Hillsbrad foothills. It couldn't get any darker. Awala Malasada. At this moment, Marion Firewing, who was not far from them, released an even more violent chain of spells. A huge ball of chaotic ice energy the size of a carriage condensed in front of Marion's left palm. Unlike Ronin's berserk magic, Marion displayed her powerful control as an advanced magus. The sound of wind whistling could be heard. Unlike Ronin's berserk magic, Marion displayed her powerful control as an advanced magus. Not only did the ice arrows form a net that enveloped the Crimson Dragon, but they also had a clear arc as they shot out. Marion was actually able to adjust the angle of the attack after the spell was released to maximize the hit rate. The giant dragon that was already in a diving state was indeed worthy of its title as a 1,000-year-old dragon. It seemed like it could not change its direction at all, but with just a flap of its wings, it suddenly climbed more than 30 meters. If Marion's ice arrows, which had a greater range than Blizzard, could self-adjust, the giant dragon might have dodged them. Even so, the giant dragon still managed to dodge most of the ice arrows. As for the remaining small portion, the giant dragon directly used its dragon breath to cancel them out. Except for two. It was obvious that these two ice arrows were Marion's greatest trump card. They looked exactly the same on the surface, but contained at least 10 times the ice element of an ordinary ice arrow. Not only was it powerful, it could also accelerate. A moment ago, it was as fast as a bird, but in the next instant, it had turned into 2 shooting stars that shot at the orc on the dragon's back. How could a mere Dragon Maw orc withstand the attack of a veteran Radiant Moon Mage? In a breath's time, the orc had already turned into an ice sculpture. Just the tremors of the giant dragon's ascent had already caused the ice sculpture to crack and crumble, turning into ice crystal dust that dissipated in a few breaths' time. Unfortunately, this was already the limit of what Marion could do. If it was a head-on battle on land, the victor would only be known after the fight. However, an elven mage who could not fly against a giant dragon that could freely soar and perform all sorts of tactical maneuvers would only put Marion at a disadvantage. Even though Xueqi had rushed over and fired a barrage of arcane missiles at the giant dragon, it was still unable to stop the giant dragon from soaring into the sky. The giant dragon circled around 300 meters in the air, its terrifying yellow pupils carefully sizing up the 3 mages below. Apologies, Alliance mages. I have to report your existence to Necros. The pupils of everyone in the team of 5 shrank. Chapter 474. Unlike the others, Xueqi completely ignored Ronin. The dragon's figure was reflected in his eyes. But whether it was Ronin or the dragon, Duke didn't really care about either of them. What Xueqi cared about was Deathwing. If he couldn't attract Deathwing's attention and get the Black Dragon King's interest, then it would be useless no matter what he did. There wasn't a single warlock in the entire alliance. Apart from warlocks, no one could use the artifact Demon's Soul. Even if Xueqi was a warlock, he wouldn't use such a method to take control of Alexstrasza. Of course, how to deal with the current situation was also a problem. A young dragon with a body length of 23 or 24 meters and a wingspan of almost 20 meters. If they left it alone, just the fact that it wouldn't come down and was circling in the sky like a demon to summon the dragon was enough for the team of 5 to suffer. After Sasha arrived, she tried to use the ability she obtained from the Storm Altar to aim at the dragon's eyeball. She failed. 300 meters above the ground, the flow of the wind had become extremely chaotic. She had indeed awakened the power of wind, but that was more of a control over the wind. It wasn't like her elder sister who strengthened herself with the storm. One shouldn't think that a dragon's eyeball was easy to damage just because it was a weakness. As long as a dragon was more than 1,000 years old, its transparent eye membrane would be as hard as steel. Sasha bit her lower lip and said in a clear voice, "If anyone has a way, it's best if you use it now." Everyone first looked at Marion. She was the best fighter among the 5. But the Radiant Moon Mage spread her hands. "It's too far." Everyone noticed that Marion said it was too far, not that they couldn't fight. Then, everyone ignored Ronin, who was at a loss of what to do, and ignored the short-handed Holy Knight. They focused their attention on the core of the team, Duke. Xueqi looked at the red dragon circling in the sky and asked Sasha, "Can you help me guide my magic?" "How?" "I need you to blow the elemental particles from my body onto that big lizard." Sasha was no fool. She was smart enough to immediately understand what Xueqi meant. Putting aside the power of the spell, just the fact that the direction of the wind could change at any moment made it difficult for the spell to hit a target more than 100 meters away. In fact, in a large-scale war, there was no way to coordinate the power of so many Pharaoh mages without a large-scale mana amplification magic array. What Sasha had done was actually some sort of amplification. Even if they did not know how to use magic, The high elves were still very sensitive to the flow of elemental power. Not bothering to avoid suspicion, Sasha pressed herself against Xueqi's back and pointed at the giant dragon 300 meters in the air. A gentle breeze blew from their backs, and their silver hair fluttered in the wind, gently caressing Xueqi's face. The eyes of the three people beside them were transfixed, because in that instant, they vaguely felt that the hair colors of the two were unexpectedly the same. In the scene before their eyes, the two figures seemed to have blended beautifully. Even with a beauty hugging him from behind, Xueqi did not have the time to be distracted. He carefully sensed the trajectory of the fire elemental particles that he had released. In his retina, he could see the system elf rapidly calculating the trajectory of the shot with a 3D model. Wind direction, wind speed, fire elemental particles. All the data flashed in Xueqi's mind. This time, Xueqi raised his right hand, which was under Sasha's jade arm. Their arms overlapped. Xueqi then raised his left hand and placed it on Sasha's right arm. He softly chanted an incantation, and a fireball the size of a basin condensed in front of their fingertips. The fireball was very small, so small that it was about the size of a magic apprentice who had just learned fireball. With a soft bang, the fireball flew out. Amateurs enjoyed the show, while experts appreciated the artistry. Gavin Rad was just an onlooker, but Marion and Ronan's eyes were glued to the small fireball. The fireball shot up into the sky with an eye-catching tail of flames. If it were a magic apprentice's fireball, it would probably dissipate after flying 30 meters. Xueqi's fireball was different. Although it looked like a bonfire in a brazier, the two realized that Xueqi's fireball did not dissipate at all after climbing 50 meters. There were still as many fire elemental particles after flying 50 meters. 100 meters passed. 200 meters. 250 meters. Only then did the fireball visibly shrink. It was not a visual reduction, but the elemental energy it contained had shrunk. At first, the dragon soaring in the sky had only roared to inform its compatriots to come help. It did not care about the fireball at all. From the dragon's point of view, human magic beyond a certain distance was just like the fireworks they played with, purely for show. It was wrong. The fireball still did not dissipate. Instead, it was getting closer and faster. It actually accelerated twice. Roar! The red dragon was furious. Using a fireball in front of a red dragon that specialized in fire was a provocation in itself. Not to mention that the small fireball looked like it could really hit it. Whoosh! Without hesitation, the red dragon spat out dragon breath in an attempt to melt the fireball. Something strange happened again. The small fireball actually made a turn in the air, drawing a dazzling arc, bypassing a large area of the dragon's breath. Then, it accelerated a third time, and finally, the fireball smashed into the giant dragon's lizard face. Red dragons were naturally resistant to fire. The fireball did not do much damage. But it was a slap in the face. In the truest sense, it was a slap in the face from all angles and connotations. Most red dragons did not have good tempers. Not bothering to wait for reinforcements, the 1,000-year-old red dragon flapped its wings and swooped down from the sky. It wanted to teach these insignificant humans who dared to challenge its dignity an unforgettable lesson. As the dragon swooped down, everyone looked at Marion. This powerful counselor of the Silver Moon Council immediately displayed the power of a radiant moon great mage. Complicated arcane energy patterns that were difficult for outsiders to understand spread under her feet. The arcane energy condensed into lines that formed a magic array that was 10 meters in diameter, and looked like a work of art in itself. Every inch of the magic array was flowing with mana at a high speed, constantly revolving at a high speed. Then, when the dragon swooped less than 50 meters from the ground, countless magic tentacles that looked like hooks suddenly appeared and netted the dragon. Chapter 475. It would be a joke to use magic to suppress a dragon that was known for its strength. Binding only needed to be controlled at the critical moment. The huge purple-blue energy arrow that Marion had condensed as much arcane energy as possible shot out from her arm that was held horizontally in front of her chest. A huge arrow over 5 meters long pierced through the air and shot towards the dragon. The dragon demonstrated to the team of 5 the terrifying power and superb control of the dragon. It had actually used some sort of berserk sorcery to expand its body by 30%, which was followed by an even more terrifying power. The tentacles that were made of magic made a crisp sound. In the blink of an eye, the dragon flapped its wings again and leaped 5 meters into the air. This was the 5 meters of life and death. At this pace, Marion's ultimate spell would not hit. At this moment, Sasha made her move. Beauty like a pine tree. Bow like a full moon. 2 sharp arrows, enhanced by the power of the wind, shot straight at the crimson behemoth's head. 50 meters was not a short distance. It should have been faster than Marion's magic and hit the dragon's eyes first. However, the dragon's head suddenly moved at the moment of impact. A moment later, the arrow did not hit the target that when Risa had expected. Even though it did not hit the dragon's eyes, the 2 arrows that contained Sasha's full power still injured the dragon's eyelids. Roar! It was an unbearable cry of pain. This could only blind it, not kill it. At this moment, no one noticed that Xueqi had used the swamp beside him to stack arcane impact. Most mages could stack 4 to 5 layers of arcane impact at most, but Xueqi had stacked it up to 12 layers. And he was using both hands, stacking 12 layers of arcane impact. The future Archmage Ronin was dumbfounded, and Marion, who was at the peak of the mystical domain and second only to the 2 kings of magic, was even more shocked. This control. Was Xueqi still human? The first arcane impact was released, but it didn't hit the dragon directly. Instead, it hit the left wing. Xueqi did not expect it to severely injure the giant beast. To the scales and thick skin of a 1,000-year dragon, a Morning Star wizard's magic was no different from a human's ordinary sword. It was a laughable method of attack. However, the impact from arcane impact instantly broke the balance of the giant dragon while Sasha was blinded. The entire dragon was flipped over 45 degrees. The second wave of arcana techniques was unleashed. This was the real deal. A huge ball of arcane energy exploded on the dragon's head. It was as if an invisible and untouchable 100-meter-tall giant had clenched his fists and punched down from above. There was a rumbling explosion in the air. In the next second, the entire dragon was blasted down by this powerful impact. No more, no less. It was exactly 5 meters. This scene was very, very funny. It looked like a frog trying to jump out of a pot of boiling water, but halfway through, it was covered by a lid and had no choice but to fall back into the pot. This kind of coordination was something mortals could not imagine. It was as if the god of fate had said that the next step was for you to die. No matter how careful you were, how you dodged, or how you defended, you still fell for it. It was a mystical force that almost reached the level of fate. But Xueqi did it. Without Sasha and Xueqi's coordination, Marion's all-out attack would have sent the dragon flying laughably. With little mana left, Marion could only wait for death. But with the 2 of them, the dragon was like prey that had fallen into a trap, unable to struggle. Poo. This was the sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh. The magic arrow passed through the snake-like neck. The top half went in, the bottom half came out, and the chest pierced through the heart, finally emerging from the dragon's back. Bang. This was the sound of a second explosion after the violent elemental force entered the dragon's body. A radiant moon great wizard. This was a power that was second only to the 2 strongest kings of magi. It finally exploded in the dragon's body, wantonly destroying its internal organs. The dragon's powerful life force was still supporting it. But the intense pain from its neck and lower body, as well as 1,000 years of battle experience, told this young dragon that it was destined to die. This was beyond the limits of what its body could endure. The huge and powerful heart was still beating vigorously. But the dragon's blood that should have been pumped out into the arteries began to spread from the heart due to the destruction of the ventricles. The dragon's blood, which mortals viewed as a treasure, shot out from the dragon's body that had already fallen 30 meters into the air. At this moment, no one in the team of 5 had the time to feel the joy of killing the dragon. They were shocked to see that the dragon's chest had already swelled up, and there was a clear, piercing red light between its ribs like the sun. The dragon was going to go all out. It wasn't just the dragon's breath. The dragon's entire body started to scoop towards the team of 5. This was a dragon's breath at 0 distance. The faces of the 5 in the team were all pale. Dragons had reverse scales. Touching it would enrage them. Now, it wasn't just a reverse scale. You wanted the dragon's life. It would be strange if you didn't drag it down with you. Time seemed to freeze. A distance of 30 meters could be covered in the blink of an eye for a dragon. No matter what decision he made, it was an instantaneous reaction. Gavin Rad, who had been watching the show, activated the paladin's invincibility. The power of holy light burst forth, and he turned himself into a giant golden egg. At least at the last moment, he stood in front of Xueqi. He got into a horse stance, raised his hammer, and assumed a defensive stance. Ronan and Marion were both mages. They flashed as far away as they could, followed by a beautiful ice barrier. Yes, these two opened the fridge. Only now did Sasha realize that her teammates were all shameless hooligans. 1 invincibility. 3 fridges. All of them could save themselves at critical moments. But she was a ranger. No matter how fast she ran, she could only run. How could she be faster than a dragon that was flying in the sky and diving at high speed? Sasha's pretty face lost all color. Her delicate face was almost the same color as her silver hair. She forgot to breathe and forget to run. She had simulated over 100 scenarios in her mind, but none of them could let her escape. The dragon was too fast, and the range of its breath was too wide. If a dragon of this level breathed down, the area within a 50-meter radius would definitely turn into a fiery hell. Not even a blade of grass would grow. Sasha was in despair. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.